The events unfold in a night city, where someone began to scream loudly and loudly. The young man, frightened by what was happening, could not comprehend the reason for such cruel events that suddenly affected his life, and could not understand why such terrible things were happening to him. The people around him remained indifferent to his misfortune, despite the fact that his life was in danger. The mysterious stranger, holding a knife in his hands, slowly approached, preparing to deliver a crushing blow. After the attack, the stranger began to take money from the protagonist's hands. The boy lying on the pavement watched helplessly while his grandfather needed medication because he was in the hospital, but passersby didn't care. The money was supposed to be given to an older man, and the boy was going to explain it with all his might, but he realized it was too late. Tears of helplessness glistened in his eyes, and his name was Yanni, and he was only 20 years old. On September 18th this year, he lost his life in a dark alley because of a stranger armed with a knife. However, after some time, Yanni suddenly came to his senses. Looking around, he became confused, not understanding where he was. There was a strange noise all around, like the sound of a moving train. Rising up a little, he realized that he was inside the train, but he didn't know how he got there. It seemed to him that everything that was happening could be a dream, and he had never died before. Sitting on the bench, he noticed that there was no one else on the train except him, which seemed very strange to him. However, at the moment it seemed more important to him to deliver the money to his grandfather. He turned his head to determine the direction of the train and find out when they would arrive at the nearest town. The view of the landscape presented before the guy really amazed him. He could not imagine that he would find himself in such a strange place. The city that Yanni was approaching seemed incredible and unknown to him, as he had never seen anything like it before. While he was riding the train, the guy started to panic and bang his fists on the glass, wanted to get out, realizing that some mistake had occurred and he urgently needed to leave this place. The panic grew with each passing second, and soon Yanni realized that something was really wrong here. After checking his pockets, the boy discovered that the money he had worked so hard to save to help his grandfather was completely gone. Feeling very uneasy, he nevertheless remembered that his money had been stolen by the same stranger who had attacked him in the alley. If all this is not a dream, then, apparently, the main character is already dead. Realizing this, Yanni began to panic even more, not knowing what to do in such a situation and what to do next. In despair, he felt his knees, not believing that all this was actually happening to him right here. The money was of the utmost importance, but it was now in the hands of a killer who was roaming the city. The guy was banging on the train door and shouting, demanding that it stop and let him out. Gradually, his strength faded, but he continued to knock on the doors. Luckily, the train was due to arrive at the next station soon. Calling the station Huangchuan, they urged passengers to check their belongings and prepare to leave. Overcoming his weakness, Yanni tried to realize that all this was actually reality. The train slowly stopped at the station. Trying to open the door, the guy moved forward resolutely, realizing that he needed to leave the train, even if it was the kingdom of the dead. When the door finally opened, he stepped out of the train and hurried away. As he ran towards his grandfather, Yanni felt a strong sense of guilt for not being with him for so long. As he walked the great distance, he knew that his grandfather only had to wait a little while for him to reach him. Arriving in the city, Yanni looked around, trying to understand what was happening, but he was still confused. The mysterious masked man demanded time from another, and the guy with cat ears begged for forgiveness and extra days to pay off the debt. But the disgruntled man was adamant, taking out his katana, ignoring the boy's requests. This situation further undermined the morale of the protagonist, as he now felt fear of the people around him. Although these creatures were difficult to call human due to their varied forms and species, they rarely resembled humans. Dragons were not uncommon in this city, but for Yanni this was the first time, and he could not understand what was happening here. Looking at himself, he realized that he was wearing clothes that did not belong to him, as if someone had deliberately changed his clothes. This caused the hero to panic even more, and out of despair he fell to his knees again. With a strong feeling of anger and fury, he screamed at the top of his voice that this could not go on any longer and that he needed to return home as soon as possible. When the passerby heard this, he turned his attention to the new guy in town. The unknown man immediately decided to invite the worried guy to come closer. At first glance, a good-natured and plump man offered to help the main character find his home. Looking at the guy, the man assumed that he was probably new to the city, and Yanni was immediately interested in who the stranger was. Ignoring the hero's protests, the man began to lead him away, realizing that it would be better for them to talk inside. Luckily, it turned out to be an ordinary cafe that only served tea, and the hero was glad to see something normal in this unfamiliar city. The unknown man invited the guy to sit down so they could talk. The tea at this establishment was truly excellent, although it looked unusual. Confused by such goodwill, the guy still decided to ask the name of this mysterious man. The stranger introduced himself as Wang Xiaosha and offered the guy information that would be useful to him in the future for survival in this city. The man also handed the boy his business card, and Yanni looked at it carefully before asking where it was from. While lighting a cigar, Wang Xiaosha said that the city was called Huangquan. Feeling very anxious, the boy shouted that he knew it was Huangquan, but everything looked very strange and unusual for the city. Wang Xiaosha laughed at this statement and asked the guy to calm down, explaining that just because he was here didn't mean he was dead, and he probably just suffered an accident. Shocked, the hero asked himself whether he was really still alive in the real world. And it was true. And what's more, perhaps he was not only alive, but also unharmed. After all, at present they're most likely trying to revive him in the real world. Wang Xiaosha decided to share a secret with the guy, and here time flows differently, and if he follows the local rules, he will be able to return to the world of the living. For the young man, this information was incredible, and he could not believe that there was a chance to return to real life from the ghost world. In this case, the hero became interested in what conditions he needed to fulfill in order to return to normal life. It turned out that games were held there every day, and after each game the guy was given one poker card. Wang Xiaosha believed that the guy knew what poker was. The guy will have to collect 54 poker cards and find the key hidden by the forces of darkness, and after fulfilling these conditions, he will be able to return to life. For the uncomprehending guy, it seemed like some kind of plot about sorceresses, but he still wanted to find out the truth. But the truth was that he would actually have to play games to get poker cards, and he immediately started running to start the game. Suddenly, the man asked the boy to stop as he wanted to tell him something else. He told the guy that there was no need to rush and the guy could share some of his time with him, but he didn't have any money right now. But it's not about money, it's about time, and here time is the currency. Time is used for payment, and by winning games, the guy can increase his time reserve. Smiling, the hero asked how much time he needed to hand it over, and Wang Xiaosha said that 5 days would be enough for him. For the young man, 5 days was a paltry amount of time compared to his remaining lifespan. The happy guy agreed, and he understood that this man had helped him a lot. The hero wanted to know how to transfer his time, and Wang Xiaosha began to think about a solution to this problem. After searching through his things for a bit, he pulled out a time interface, a device used to make time payments, and it only required a hand to use it. Also, to determine the time, a password was required, and this time the hero used his date of birth as the password. In gratitude for their help, the heroes were given 7,200 minutes, translated using an unusual device. However, at the time of the transfer, he only had 10 minutes available. Yanni even more worried, and he couldn't understand how this happened, and thought that the device was broken, and it was all a lie. The sinister man began to grin, stating that it would take him at least an hour to figure out the reason for the device's breakdown. This turn of events alerted the hero, and he came closer to find out why he was given only 5 days, when now he only had 10 minutes left. Those 10 minutes became his lifespan, and at that moment Yanni had only 10 minutes left to live. The man was much stronger and easily pushed the protagonist away, as he got what he wanted. In fact, 10 years of ordinary life in this place was equal to only 1 day, and 5 days was a huge price for insignificant information. As he was running out of the building, Wang Xiaosha warned the boy that it would be better not to waste his last 10 minutes on trifles. In rage and despair, the boy realized that he had encountered a swindler who had deceived and robbed him. Realizing that something had to be done about this, the hero did everything possible to catch up with the villain and get his time back. While running through the streets, someone suddenly grabbed him by the pants, trying to stop him. It was a guy with cat ears who was begging for help because his time was running out and he could die at any moment. The masked man stood nearby and declared that this scoundrel's time was up and he deserved this fate. Paying with tears, the stranger continued to ask for just a few minutes, a drop of time. The timer on his hand was slowly reaching 0, indicating that there was very little time left. When the time was up, his body instantly began to disintegrate into tiny particles like a robot. The hero, not understanding what was happening, fell into a panic, trying to figure out what happened to the stranger. His body was shattered into tiny pieces, and he could no longer move or function as before. Realizing that he could face the same fate, the hero realized that every minute is valuable, and he needs to act to gain more time. Passers-by watched the incident, and some expressed sympathy, while others blamed the guy for not managing his time. Each of the creatures present considered it their duty to remind the protagonist that his fate could be the same, and that he too would run out of time. Suddenly, cars with rabbits rushed by nearby and stopped abruptly. 2 small creatures jumped out of the car and began to approach the guy. Yanni even more wary, and he did not understand why these creatures came here and what they were going to do. It turned out that they had come to collect the body parts of a stranger lying in the square. Several creatures carefully examined the boy's body and checked if he had anything valuable. Now the hero understood that in this world, those who run out of time are punished. Those whose time counter reached 0 disappeared completely. Realizing the trouble he was in, Yanni fell into despair and wondered what to do next. The announcement was made over a megaphone about the start of registration of players at the nearest ATM, and they were asked to wait in line. Yanni recalled the existence of a game in which he could get extra time. All city residents were urged to follow the rules and thank for their cooperation. As he continued to run, the boy realized that he had no choice and needed to start playing as soon as possible. Time was running out, but Yanni didn't stop, heading towards the time ATM. Around him were various creatures, including people who looked like girls and elephants who behaved like people. Passing by everyone, the hero shouted that he urgently needed to start the game in order to gain more time. Yanni reached the slot machine. He realized that this was the game he needed to play. Once he started playing, he realized that he still had to figure out how to win, because the rules of the game were unknown to him. Suddenly, the slot machine started making sounds and asked for confirmation of personal data. Without hesitation, the hero agreed to provide his personal data to start the game. Despite some hesitation before the game began, he knew he had to take advantage of every opportunity to earn more time. In his thoughts, there was only his grandfather, whom he wanted to help in order to buy medicine. By pressing the button, the surrounding world began to change, acquiring completely new shades. Yanni, looking around, could not believe his eyes, as even the people around him changed their color. This shocked the guy, because he had never seen anything like this before. The next moment, an unidentified creature appeared, warmly greeting the hero and expressing joy at his appearance. The creature also reported that the game prohibits requests, speeches, and that the staff cannot provide additional time. In the game, it is important to be attentive and not to be deceived. The game must begin, and the guy had to be ready for it. After the creature stopped speaking, a mysterious portal appeared behind it, which was believed to lead to the game world. The guy didn't care what would happen next, and he boldly rushed into the portal, trying to survive. Understanding the complexity of the situation, Yanni thought only about how to quickly earn time and return to the real world. The creature behind continued to wish the young man to enjoy the gameplay. The funny tiger also wished him long life and good luck in the game. As soon as the hero crossed the threshold of the portal, a strange location opened up before him, and he immediately realized that this was the place of the game. At this time, people began to approach him and realized that they had never seen Yanni before, realizing that he was a newcomer. Not understanding what was happening, the guy began to worry and admitted that he really was a newbie. People around him were wary of him, not knowing what this newcomer was capable of and whether he posed a threat. Each of the strangers had unique abilities and modified body parts. All of them were potentially dangerous and could possess incredible power that was not always visible at first glance. The strangers were varied and looked completely different. Some of them seemed friendly, and Yanni felt they could help in the game. Seeing the other participants in the game, the guy realized that they would also be rivals in the competition. One of the men suddenly declared that it was simply madness for a beginner to take on the level of difficulty of clubs, and that Yanni was reckless. The confident man assured that the newcomer did not need to worry, as he would have the support of his brother from their guild. Little brother sincerely wanted Yanni to win and offered him to join their guild if he succeeded, but Yanni was already wary of such offers. Announcements were heard throughout the area that the Nutcracker game was about to begin, and participants were asked to familiarize themselves with the rules. Everyone present was aware of the need to prepare as effectively as possible for battle. After reading the rules, one of the participants decided that the task was not that difficult, and it was most likely just a speed competition where he could get free time as a reward. At the same time, the main character mastered the rules of the Nutcracker game and realized that everything is not as simple as it seems. Suddenly, something started falling nearby, accompanied by a loud crash. It turned out that it was the Nutcracker that had fallen, looking like a terrible monster. The unknown creature was happy because there were so many players who wanted to play together. Approaching the card, one of the participants asked for permission for an early start. Upon hearing the request, the creature was at first surprised, but then realized that he was a privileged participant and agreed to his request. Immediately, one of the participants started with a privilege card, which showed how much such privileges were valued. In any case, the hero realized that an early start could increase his chances of winning, justifying the time spent. The monster announced that his baby was not expecting and would soon start singing. Yanni realized that he couldn't change anything and would have to figure out the game as it evolved. Suddenly, the monster announced the start of the game, and all participants ran at incredible speed, striving for victory. It was impressive for the young man, because he didn't expect people to run at such a speed. After a few minutes of running, the guy already felt tired and was surprised by the fast speed of his rivals. Turning his head, the hero noticed that he was not the only one running slowly. There was another strange woman behind him. But her pace didn't last long. She took out the potion to drink. Once the woman took the potion, she gained the power to run faster. With the help of a magic potion, She sped up several times and overtook the other participants. Her speed allowed her to easily overtake Yanni and move on. Breathing heavily, the hero shouted to his mother not to hurry so fast because he was the last one. While going through the tests, the guy wondered why everyone here had special abilities. The mutant continued to insist, shouting that they were all playing on equal terms, and whoever lost would no longer be able to participate in the games. With a grin on its face, the unknown creature continued to scream, warning that if Yanni stopped, he would immediately lose his life and the time he had left. The Nutcracker also remembered that they played like this in childhood with their friends, and after the game, everyone would have a nice rest. The next second, the villain exclaimed that the Nutcracker forbade them to speak or move. Due to the sudden stop, the woman instantly fell to the ground and began to slide. Having stopped, the hero froze in place in order to comply with the rules of the game and avoid defeat. The sudden stop caused sweat to start running down his face, as he was very nervous and didn't know what would happen next. The creature began to scream at the top of its lungs, declaring that one of the participants had broken the rules and that now there would be a lot of fun. The mutant's head spun, and he continued to shout that the rules had been broken and the participant would be punished. The elderly woman instantly realized that she had probably broken the rules by not stopping in time and falling. After this, the mutant began to think about how to punish the participant to make it even more fun. Finally, after a few minutes, the giant summoned a huge monster that looked terrifying and was ready to eat the participant who broke the rules. For the hero, this was a terrible event, and he was afraid to even look back to see the creature continuing to stand in place. At that moment, the creature began to move forward and approach Yanni, getting closer and closer to his face. The monster's terrible fangs approached the protagonist's eyes, making him feel terrible. Despite his fear, Yanni knew he had to remain still to pass the test. The monster approached the elderly woman to punish her for breaking the rules. The monster moved with incredible speed, but the woman dodged its blow, jumping to the side. Gathering all her strength, the woman decided to hit the scoundrel for his impudent act. Jumping up, the old lady flew straight towards the monster to strike his vile face. The blow was so strong that the woman easily pierced the monster's armor and made him feel pain. At that moment, the woman realized that this creature was no more dangerous than a worm that crawls out after the rain. The hero was shocked to realize that the mother was actually powerful, probably using her superpowers. Indeed, the woman used her magic. Her hand was transformed, and she wanted to test the monster's abilities in battle. The monster could also spit acid, using the liquid from its mouth to attack the enemy and prevent them from moving any further. With dexterity, the woman dodged the acid attack, which could have caused her serious harm. Despite her evasions, the woman still got some green liquid on her body. This drop caused unbearable pain, and the woman screamed from it. Now the battle became fatal for her, as the monster turned out to be stronger and had powerful abilities. The woman took out a bottle of an unknown liquid to confront the monster. After opening the bottle, she drank its contents to gain new strength. After using the potion, her leg was immediately restored. The monster was pleased with the way his pet dealt with the woman. As she tried to stand up, the woman realized she would have to use a prosthesis to continue her journey. The monster announced that the game was continuing. The protagonist felt great anxiety when he saw what was happening to the other participants. Now it became clear to him how dangerous passing the test could be in reality. After some time, the monster began the tests again, and the participants rushed to the finish line. The anxious participants tried to reach the finish line as quickly as possible. The hero felt a strong sense of anxiety, not knowing what to do to avoid punishment. The old woman was still lying on the floor, powerless and aware that the game had already begun, but she was unable to move on her own. Ignoring the participant lying on the floor, Yanni ran past as if nothing had happened. The guy pretended not to care and continued to run past, showing no sympathy. Running past, he turned around and realized that there was no time for pity and whining, because it could hinder him and the other participants in the game. The trembling woman was a pitying sight, as she was unable to move and continue the ordeal. Suddenly, the hero stopped, realizing that he could not simply pass by a woman in need of help. He decided to help the elderly woman so that she could continue to pass the tests and stay in the game. Supporting the woman, Yanni helped her stand up so she could move on. The old woman did not understand why the young man decided to help her, but he insisted that she should conserve her strength and understood that this was the best way for her to survive. The other participants began to be surprised, seeing how the guy was helping the woman, because in this game, it was everyone for himself. The woman could not imagine that in this place, she would meet such a caring person as the main character. Looking around, the guy noticed that something was wrong and realized that a new test had probably begun. The lanterns gradually went out, and darkness enveloped the rooms ahead. No one could understand what was happening, but the power outage caused concern among most of the participants. The participant shouted to the protagonist, warning that the onset of darkness could lead to trouble, and he should hurry to avoid ending up in the dark. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the woman shouted that they were moving too slowly and decided to offer Yanni a potion to increase his speed. Without thinking, the hero drank the potion that his partner gave him. The changes in his body happened instantly, increasing his speed tenfold, allowing him to pull the woman along with him effortlessly. For some participants, this was surprising as they had never seen anything like it before. Now nothing could stop the protagonist, who, under the influence of the potion, moved at great speed, his eyes glowing bright red, filling him with determination. Suddenly, the insidious creature announced that after the game, everyone needed to rest a little. The countdown began immediately, signaling that all participants would soon need to stop. Hearing this, Yanni realized that he would soon have to stop, despite his previous speed. There were only a few seconds left before the stop, and the guy immediately began to slow down. As soon as the creature announced the need to stop, the protagonist and the woman were already standing in place, not moving. All participants also froze, trying not to move, in order to avoid punishment from the insidious creature. The Nutcracker kept a close eye on all the participants to identify the rule breaker and punish him. For the monster, this was a boring activity, since he saw that all the participants followed the rules, and this deprived him of interest in the game, because he could not punish anyone. At the same time, the guy realized that if the game did not start soon, they would be enveloped in darkness, and it would be much more difficult to continue the game. The rooms gradually became dark, and if a participant found himself in one of these rooms, he would be punished. The participants, looking at each other, began to think about the next steps and plans to reach the finish line as quickly as possible. While the elderly woman was struggling to stay on her feet, she made every effort not to fall. The moment when they would be swallowed by darkness was approaching with every minute, and they could no longer stand still since the danger was close. The last lantern had just gone out, and now before them was darkness that filled them with fear, causing them to freeze in place. Suddenly the light above them went out, and they found themselves in complete darkness, remaining motionless. Suddenly the Nutcracker announced that the game was continuing, and they could now move again. Realizing that inaction was dangerous, Yanni continued to move with all his might to escape the darkness. He continued to lead the elderly woman, imploring her to pick up the pace so as not to be eliminated from the game. There is only a little left to pass the next stage of the competition. With great effort, Yanni continued to move, pulling the helpless woman along with him. Suddenly, the hero felt how the woman began to lose strength and could no longer move forward. It turned out that sweets began to fall from her back, which indicated that she was injured and her life was in danger. Realizing the complexity of the situation, the woman decided to apologize to the young man for not being able to avoid the blow. Then the boy could not understand what happened at that moment when darkness came, and the ant found herself partially in this darkness. The vile creature began to laugh, because it was funny to him that one of the participants was affected by the darkness, and the game became even more interesting. Due to serious damage to her body, the ant began to disappear, her body literally evaporating. Starting to cry, the woman screamed with all her might that she could not lose this battle because her son would be left alone and she would not be able to look after him. Unfortunately, the protagonist's partner had completely disappeared, but he noticed that the woman had lost the rings she was wearing on her fingers. Apparently, these rings had magical properties that were possessed by the ant herself, to whom they belonged. Deciding to honor the woman's memory, the protagonist picked up the rings to pass them on to her son. But as soon as he grabbed the fallen rings, the ability to transfer memories was activated. The boy began to have memories that belonged to the woman. She recalled how she played with her son. At some point, her beloved son disappeared, and only a toy remained lying on the floor in his memory. The woman then began searching for her son and posted flyers all over the city to find him. With a heavy sigh, the guy realized that his aunt had really had a hard time because she had lost her beloved son. Unfortunately, the hero failed to save the woman, and he apologized to her. Now she had nothing more to worry about, and she could go away in peace because she would no longer be bothered by the cares of the human world. Suddenly, someone nearby exclaimed that a new person with a special gift had appeared. All this time, the creatures watched the game, which was not for life but for death, and they saw how one of the people picked up the rings of the deceased participant. One of the gentlemen really enjoyed today's game and was glad that there was a new interesting participant with an unusual gift called the Devourer. The beings assumed that this man's abilities were at the stage of successor, and it was unknown whether he would be able to evolve, and in other respects, all issues should be resolved in the near future. The master suddenly declared that he needed not only the Devourer's talents, but also his eyes. For the mutated servant, this was quite unexpected. He never expected that his master would want his eyes. All this time the master continued to look at his subordinate, and wondered how he could manage to take away his eyes. But all turned out to be just a joke when the creature turned around and started laughing. In fact, not a single hair would have fallen from the servant's head if only the key had remained with him. The gentleman emphasized that the servant needed to keep the key because it was very important to him. Realizing that he was in a hopeless situation, the servant began to bow before his master and agreed to his conditions. It was a real test for the creature. He knew that if he lost the key, he would also lose his eyes. Meanwhile, the game continued, and the Nutcracker was furious. He was bored because no one was breaking his rules. Continuing to run, the hero realized his helplessness, realizing that as long as the rules were not broken, he would not be able to win, and his fate could repeat the same fate as the strange woman. There was another rather weak participant in the battle who was very exhausted and could no longer move forward. The old man understood that he was now the last participant because he was the weakest link in this game. Suddenly he stopped and thought that he needed help, but he did not call upon his wasp, which he had. It turned out that the old man could summon a wasp that would go to the other participants and strike them so that they would no longer take part in the game. With incredible speed, the animal continued its movement towards the participants to attack them. The Nutcracker cried out again, demanding that all participants stop moving and began counting down, announcing a pause in the game. Everyone stopped, afraid to move further because it could lead to their death. At the same time, the hero thought that it would be good if the game continued in the same spirit. But a bee appeared nearby, flying towards one of the participants. It was bitter for the Nutcracker to see that none of the participants were moving, which only irritated him even more. The hostile wasp approached its victim, preparing to sting it to make it move. One of the participants was insidiously bitten from behind, which began to feel unbearable pain that could force him to move. For the young guy, standing in front, this was a real test because he did not expect such a sharp pain. The boy fell to the ground in pain and screamed, not understanding what was happening to him. The creature was jubilant to see that someone had decided to help, and that was why it was time for the participant to be punished. Watching what was happening, the man rejoiced, realizing that in this way he could get rid of another participant. After the rules were broken, the creature that had previously fought the woman was released. The young man realized that he had no other choice and needed to use everything he had in his arsenal. He took out the unusual pistol, knowing it might come in handy. Seeing this, the hero thought that the guy had taken out an ordinary water pistol, which seemed strange to him. In fact, this gun was special. It turned into a giant cannon that the guy was going to use against the approaching creature. The giant worm was approaching the guy, who was already ready to shoot. This was the only chance for the guy to win, while the worm was still far enough away. Luckily, the cannon was fully charged, and a magical beam was fired, aimed straight at the villain. The impact of pure energy caused the worm unbearable pain, causing it to scream and stop attacking. The creature suffered from great pain, as the blow caused colossal damage to its health. Soon his head began to smoke, and a cloud of smoke developed from it. After this, the giant enemy was destroyed and fell to the ground, unable to move. For the main character, it was a real miracle that an ordinary participant was able to defeat such a huge creature. The Nutcracker watched his pet closely, encouraging him and urging him not to give up. If the creature loses today, it will go without dinner and will lose the ability to punish the participants. Suddenly, the guy noticed how the creature began to move, as if something was crawling out of it. This turned out to be true, and the worm was only a cocoon for the giant creature that hatched from it. Watching what was happening, Yanni was shocked to realize that the creature had evolved. Now, it was a giant insect, similar to a grasshopper and a praying mantis at the same time. The sight left the boy bewildered, unable to believe his eyes, and realizing that he would have to fight again. Using the magic cannon, he began to attack his opponent, aiming to gain victory. The shots created explosions that hit the enemy and prevented them from attacking. However, the creature remained indifferent to such attacks and was not harmed by them. The giant monster was about to attack again, and the weapon was powerless against it. The participant continued to think about how to defeat such a strong opponent and continue the fight. The evil insect attacked with great speed, giving no chance for resistance. The guy began to worry about his life, seeing how fast the enemy was moving. The creature was approaching, preparing to deliver the most powerful blow that any of the participants had ever seen. When a monster attacked, a powerful explosion occurred, stunning all witnesses. This sight delighted the man, who thought that one of the participants was leaving the battle. However, when the smoke cleared, the man was shocked by what he saw and could not believe his eyes. Because the guy was able to repel the giant monster's attack without giving it a chance to attack. Looking at his pet, the battle participant exclaimed that his time had come. A bird named Bobo was about to attack, trying to help his owner. The little chick was approaching the vile and terrible monster at great speed. Once it reached its target, it easily passed through the villain's head, destroying him with one blow. The attack was astonishing, and the chick penetrated the monster's armored head, rendering it unable to fight. The angry youth shouted that the monster would definitely lose now and swung his giant sword for another blow. The blow was also powerful and easily severed the vile insect's horn. The participant believed that the battle had to end. The monster could no longer fight equally. But to finally defeat the giant, it was necessary to deliver several more powerful blows with the sword. The boy swung his sword with all his might, dealing many powerful blows to the villain, who was unable to resist. Strong attacks did not give the monster a chance to survive, and it fell apart into small pieces. The determined boy asked the Nutcracker if he was satisfied and suggested that they continue the game since the other participants were waiting. The Nutcracker was delighted by the spectacle and thought the guy was very cool for defeating a pet that no one had been able to defeat before. The guy addressed all the participants, warning that he would still win, no matter who was against him. He also told others not to make him waste his time on trash like them. The elderly man only listened to the boy's words without expressing his own opinion. When the competition resumed, the participants continued to move forward without slowing down. The man thought that the guy was really strong, and he would have to put in more effort. He summoned more wasps to attack the next participants. The wasps were incredibly fast and would approach other participants to sting them. The sting of such a wasp was very painful due to the strong poison, and the participant experienced unbearable pain. It turned out that the wasp not only stings the participant, but also penetrates his body, acting as a parasite. Another participant noticed an insect flying near him, as the device on his head signaled about it. Using his abilities, the guy immediately neutralized the creature that was trying to sting him. The insect was instantly killed by the participant's skills. It turned out to be a blood-sucking cicada. Having stopped, the guy asked the other participants who of them attacked him, but no one wanted to confess and only asked him to get out of the way. Noticing the magic seal, the other participant also realized that someone was trying to kill them, which seriously affects the course of the competition. The player immediately recognized that this guy was Hong Shan from Huanchuan Co-Shop. Not quite understanding what was being discussed, the guy did not confirm that this was the case and did not see anything special in it. It turned out that the man mentioned this because he was from the Scarlet Killer Shop, and their shops were in alliance. The hero continued to watch these guys, realizing that they were planning something very terrible. This actually happened when the man suggested that they unite and destroy everyone who stood before them. Hongshan, hearing this proposal, agreed, considering it a good idea since someone present was a murderer. One of them shouted that it was time to attack, and they immediately set to work. Hongshan used his hand to activate a seal that could kill a person with a single touch. These events made the guy even more wary, realizing that now the dissatisfied participants of the competition had united and were trying to kill everyone else. The seal began to slowly fall to the floor, covered in blue flames, heralding the beginning of the transformation. Instantly, the paper seal burst into flames and turned into a bright blue flame. When the seal was completely burned out, a soldier with a weapon appeared in its place, ready to attack the rest of the players. This insidious creature sought to kill the protagonist, waving its sword and wishing for his death. The young man, fearing the consequences of such a blow, did not know what kind of creature it was and how he should act. Luckily, thanks to the rings on his fingers, his hand turned into an impenetrable black demonic construct, with which he was able to block the sword. The hero was relieved that he was not hurt by such a strong blow, realizing that if the sword had hit his body, he should have been sad about his fate. He watched and realized that this boy was much more dangerous than they had previously thought. The boy did his best to deflect the sword attack aimed at him. Preparing for a counterattack, he decided to do everything in his power to survive. Using his magical hand, he struck the monster hard, breaking its powerful armor. The monster fell to the floor after such a strong blow and could no longer attack. He was immobilized. The allies began to discuss their next steps, and the man from behind asked the boy if he needed help, surprised that he couldn't handle the newcomer despite his fighting appearance. In fact, the guy had many different seals in his inventory, with which he could summon even more terrible creatures. The seals were used, and in their place appeared 4 soldiers with weapons and armor. The old man began to worry, seeing that the situation was becoming serious, and they had to find out who had released the insects. The girl was also worried about her life and asked her boyfriend what they should do, but Xiao Jia remained calm and asked people to trust him. Suddenly the young man shouted for everyone to stop and listen to him. The hero revealed that Huansen and another member had teamed up to destroy everyone else, and that if they teamed up, their chances of success would increase. It was a logical decision for everyone, and together their chances of winning would increase. If they continue to raise their hands, the other participants will simply not leave it unanswered and will take revenge. The old man was glad that his crime was discovered and he was not punished, even though he was the one who released the insects. He was glad to see that a fight was about to begin, for which he was prepared. He threw off his jacket and introduced the other participants to the power of the Crimson Devil of the underworld. He had a tattoo on his body that began to glow bright yellow, signaling that he was summoning the Crimson Devil. At the same time, the old man began to laugh and release insects that flew to attack the participants who dared to attack him. One of the man's allies immediately realized that it was he who released the insects that had previously attacked other participants in the game. The hero immediately stopped them and shouted that they should not quarrel, but rather unite to defeat common enemies. The former allies began to argue among themselves, preparing for a battle in which only one side would survive. At this time, the monsters were approaching Yanni, not giving him a chance to escape and forcing him to engage in battle. One of the demonic monsters leapt forward and swung its sword strike. Luckily, the protagonist's ally was agile enough to dodge the sword strike. Xiao Jie used fire breath to avenge her companion and protect him from the monster. Under the influence of the magical fire, the villain began to burn and scream in pain. Another member was about to draw his pistol to avenge the villain who dared to attack his allies. Taking out a gun, the guy started shooting and ordered his opponents to watch as he attacked them. The shots were immediately effective, and the monsters were stunned by such a strong attack. Huangsing began to get annoyed as he saw his ally simply standing there watching the battle without taking any action. It turned out that the man simply released the demon and began to transform into an evil creature that wanted to destroy everyone in its path. The protagonist's ally attacked the demon that had just been released using his biomechanical arm. The attack from the biomechanical arm was powerful, but the demon was able to repel it using his superhuman abilities. From such a powerful defense, the guy's body began to shake, and he experienced unbearable pain because his attack did not penetrate the demon's defense. At this moment, the main character decided to take advantage of the opportunity and jumped forward with force, preparing a counterattack. Screaming incredibly loudly, Yanni waved his magical hand, trying to defeat the demon. The ally was hopelessly paralyzed, as the demon resisted strongly and did not allow him to move. However, the demon himself decided to throw the guy at the main character in order to intercept the attack and avoid damage. The blow worked, and the two allies collided, temporarily immobilized. As they fell to the ground, they realized that their plan had failed and they needed to act differently to win. Looking back, the protagonist noticed that someone was approaching from behind, preparing to attack. It was a terrible monster with a huge stick, ready to deal a crushing blow. Luckily, an ally noticed him and fired a blast of magical fire that destroyed the monster. The lady who entered the battle caused joy because she was incredibly strong and ordered her allies not to relax as the battle was still ongoing. The demon approached her, threatening that she would pay for playing with fire. Xiao Jie began to worry about her friend and warned Chu Qi was alert as she was being attacked from behind. Thanks to her ally, the girl remained safe as the demon was stopped by a biomechanical hand. This move was truly impressive, and the hand was launched remotely and struck with lightning speed. Resisting the attack, the demon was stunned and tried to figure out what was happening and what kind of creature was in front of him, because he had never seen anything like it before. At this time, the protagonist realized that they had a chance to complete this test. Boldly rushing to attack the demon, the boy prepared for a counterattack, approaching the target with a powerful swing of his demonic hand. With a powerful blow, Yanni incapacitated his opponent, depriving him of the ability to resist. The demon couldn't believe what happened, and an ordinary man was able to defeat him. Yanni was able to defeat the super-powerful demon with just one blow, completely overpowering it. His ally Huangsing was stunned, and his opponent was destroyed, leaving him alone against 5. The allies were rejoicing and now had a huge advantage and were going to finish this fight. There was only one opponent left, and with their combined efforts, it was easy for them to defeat him. The villain standing before them resembled a clown with robotic accessories. The enemy did not acknowledge such an insult and scoffed, considering it a joke for a bunch of losers that they had done so well. However, the villain himself was ready to joke and began to use his magical abilities. This alerted the guy, who immediately noticed that the enemy was preparing for a new attack. Understanding the danger, Chu Qi decided to respond with a magical flame attack. A giant fireball rushed towards the enemy, giving him no chance to dodge. However, Huangsing was able to defend himself from the attack, preventing the fight from ending. This only caused laughter from the enemy, who was ready to return to the attack, considering them weak. The attack took a lot of effort from the girl, and she began to cry from pain. Her caring boyfriend encouraged her not to overdo it, and save her strength to continue the battle. Suddenly an attack was launched on Xiao Jie, who was shocked, did not expect this. With tears in Chu's eyes, Chi watched as her boyfriend was attacked, but was powerless to do anything. It turned out that the attacker was Huang Sung, who teleported and struck from behind. The protagonist was filled with anger when he saw his friend being killed and realized that he could not leave it unanswered. Using his new abilities, Yanni sought to destroy the villain who killed his friend. But his attacks were slow, and the enemy was able to avoid them easily. Huang Sing also responded with an attack and stabbed the protagonist in the stomach. The blow was so strong that the boy was exhausted from pain, not expecting such an attack. The enemy believed that even if Yanni had talent, he was still not omnipotent and could lose the battle. Suddenly, the game administrator announced the appearance of the first winner, and Bai finished the game and took first place, starting the countdown. The first winner immediately apologized to the other participants, seeing how they were fighting to the death among themselves, and he did not have the courage to continue watching their fight, so he decided to pass by, avoiding unnecessary friction. Some people immediately realized that the battle was missing one player, and this is what brought Bai victory. The old man also decided to leave, shouting that they should continue to fight themselves, since it did not concern him and he had nothing to do with it. Hearing this, Huang Seng could not tolerate such behavior from the culprit of the battle and decided to attack him. It turned out that the enemy threw a dagger at the old man, but missed, and the dagger flew very close to his head. Immediately after this, the villain decided to use a magical technique to summon another weapon. It was the same sword that was already in his hands, and he threw it at the old man. Using his magical powers, Huang Xing teleported to the sword and found himself very close to the old man, who could not imagine what would happen next. By launching a powerful attack, Huang Xing wanted to take revenge on the old man, since it was he who started this conflict. Thus, the number of participants was reduced by one more because the elderly man could not withstand the blow and was killed. Suddenly, the game administration announced that Jiang Shang, who also reached the finish line, took second place. The players had very little time left, and the Nutcracker encouraged them, warning that if they did not pass this test, they would die. Each of the participants did not want to die, but some could not come to terms with the fact that they had lost their loved ones with whom they had been in alliance for so long. Unfortunately, now Xiao Jie was killed, and he could no longer protect his beloved. The guy apologized to her, expressing his desire to spend the rest of his life with her. Crying with grief, the lady screamed not to be left alone, but her ally reminded them that they needed to get out of here as soon as possible. Because of their slowness, Chu Chi and the other guy could remain trapped as time was running out. The girl seemed to be losing her mind, crying and laughing, and claiming that it was just a bad dream. At the same time, the protagonist began to fall to the floor, and his ally became interested in what happened to him. It turned out that Yanni had been attacked by the mage, and his body could no longer move. Meanwhile, the light was fading, and soon they found themselves in darkness. With his eyes closed, the ally realized that there was no other way out but to act. With this thought, he hit the main character hard and shouted that he would still thank him. The blow was so powerful that Yanni was thrown several dozen meters to the side. Then the guy decided to take the girl away so that she wouldn't die in this game. He was going to save her. Using his biomechanical arm, he planned to fly into the air to effectively leave this place. Acting decisively, the ally tried to save his comrades, not letting them die. Thus, all survivors completed the game, and the administration announced the start of the countdown. Although the protagonist was seriously injured, he still remained alive and did not die in this ordeal. Sometime later, the allies were talking among themselves, and the guy was talking about how dangerous the game was and how tired he was. The protagonist noticed that his ally's fist was really strong, as he almost died from this blow, and yet the situation was critical, so such actions were necessary. This whole period of Chu Chi was sad because she lost her lover in this game. Turning his head, Yanni wanted to understand where this train was leading, because he entered the game from a different place. Every time the game ends, the players end up on this train, but Huang Xian and his white-haired boyfriend had their own ways of getting around. Suddenly, the young man remembered something and decided to check if he had been given a reward for completing the mission. Yanni put his hand in his pocket, hoping to find the desired reward there. And so, in his pocket was the very poker card that would help him return to the real world, and he received it immediately after the end of the game. That was true, but in addition to the map, he also received extra time as a reward. Luckily for the protagonist, they actually added time to his time, and now he had a whole 72 hours. Suddenly, the train announced that it was arriving at its destination station, Huangwan Avenue. The hero, looking out the window, could not believe his eyes because he did not expect to see something so huge in this city. The metropolis was truly gigantic. Huge skyscrapers and massive buildings confirmed this fact. For the other allies, this was not surprising because they had been fighting in this world for a long time, doing everything possible to survive. The girl continued to cry, but still wanted to know what they would do next. Yanni decided to talk to her and asked if the guy was really her lover, expressing his condolences and offering to unite to support each other. He meant that if she had no place to go, they could team up. First, Chu-Chi couldn't believe it, but she still decided to check how serious his intentions were. Laughing, the hero confirmed that this was so, and he was ready to unite with them into one alliance. Sometime later, the train arrived, and they found themselves together in the city again. Looking around, the hero realized that this city really wasn't that bad. Its beauty was amazing. Continuing on, the ally explained that this area was called Huanshuan and was the busiest, with many shops and shopping areas. The guy advised Yanni to take a walk around the neighborhood when he had some free time. However, the main character could not move at the same speed due to fatigue and lack of strength. Looking at his hand, Yanni saw how it was shaking and wanted to know what happened to it after the battle with the sorcerer, because his body was in a strange state. Alarmed, the girl asked to look at his hand. Looking at the guy, Chu-Chi immediately realized that he was injured and losing spiritual power. She asked him not to worry, because it was not such a big problem and she could handle it. At the same time, the ally began to feel a little jealous, seeing how the girl took care of Yanni. Chu-Chi put a tourniquet on the protagonist's arm to relieve him of pain and loss of spiritual power. Yanni felt relieved and thanked the girl for her concern, after which he introduced himself. Chu-Chi said that there was no need for gratitude, because now they were allies and should help each other. The young man, whose name was Ma-san, was also pleased to meet him and said that his nickname was Fatty. The hero, looking at this guy, could not believe his words, thinking that such a guy could not be given such a nickname. It turned out that he had actually been tall and fat before, weighing about 90 kilograms, and this had almost destroyed his talent, so he changed his figure to one that was made entirely of iron. Then he realized that this was his talent, and it seemed that he also activated it during the game, but he could not understand what it meant. Realizing that it might be difficult for newcomers to understand his talent, Ma-san decided to explain it in more detail. But this was not worth doing on an empty stomach, so they decided to find a place where they could eat and talk. Once inside the fast food restaurant, Ma-san explained that talent was expressing the appearance of his body using his life energy, and almost every inhabitant here had this ability. This ability is awakened randomly and only once per person. The hero still had questions and wanted to understand how this life energy worked. The lady decided to answer this question and said that the blue light on his wound was spiritual energy. The guy immediately remembered that in addition to the bruise on his hand, there was also a blue light. In fact, in their world, there are no physical bodies, and they represent a simple skin shell under which there is a spiritual substance. Looking at his body, Yanni couldn't believe these words because now his body was not real. The waiter brought the guy some pimbam in a stone pot and wished him a bon appetit. While he was still worried about his condition, the hero came to the conclusion that he had become something like a ghost. But the ally was against this idea and began to refute it, explaining that they were not actually ghosts. Rather, they are the embodiment of talent along with its owner, nothing more than the embodiment. The girl's talent manifested itself in the form of explosive flame, relating to active abilities, and with the help of spells, she could create fireballs for attack. Then the hero remembered that his talent, it seems, was called Successor. After thinking for a while, Ma-san said that he had heard before that Wang, the local overlord, had an incredible skill called Devourer. The young man also said that in fact, Wang is his best friend, and they've been friends for a very long time. However, the girl screamed that he couldn't be trusted, as it was a lie, and Wang couldn't be his friend. In fact, the Lord is a legend. Some even seriously call him the Lord of Huangquan. Rumor has it that his Devourer ability is so powerful that he was able to use it to start a real revolution. And subsequently, he established his own rules here, which no one would dare to violate. For the main character, this was a truly amazing story, because he could not believe that the Lord could be so powerful. As it turned out, this Lord had not appeared for more than 10 years. They even said that he had already left this world. This statement truly shocked Yanni, because he could not imagine that someone had already been able to leave the world of the dead. Feeling a strong shock, the hero wanted to know more about how it was possible to leave the world of the dead. Worried, Ma-san asked the boy to calm down, claiming that all these stories were just rumors. If you want to know more about it, they could go to the time bank together, since that was where these rumors originated. The determined young man immediately exclaimed that they urgently needed to go to the time bank to learn more about the overlord. Meanwhile, events continued to unfold in the playroom, where the Nutcracker was charging. With the help of many wires, his body was fed with energy so that he could take part in the game again. The charging process was monitored by trained personnel who noticed something interesting because their mutant had discovered an interesting newcomer. The Lord's ward was surprised that the girl noticed a new recruit with an interesting ability. The girl had only met such an interesting person once before. In fact, this person was Wang, and his ability was Devourer. Screaming joyfully, the girl said that it was him she had met earlier, and now another very interesting participant had appeared in the game. Hearing this, the servant immediately realized that there was very little time left before the beginning of the Day of Judgment. That is why the Lord will have to appear, and problems are inevitable. Some time later, events took place near the time bank. Upon entering the bank, the employee immediately addressed them, telling them that the next person should come forward to perform the transaction. At the same time, Ma-san began to flirt with Chu-Chi, calling her Cookie, offered to walk her home, which made the girl feel awkward and asked him not to do it. The girl became very interesting to him, and from that moment on, Ma-san wanted to take care of her. Coming closer, the hero wanted to know what they were doing there, but the ally said that there was nothing special, just chatting. This was great because Yanni had already traded his time, and now they could leave here. The young man also wanted to buy a couple of items that could be used in the next game. Fortunately for him, there was a merchant nearby. Because these items were not in demand, the merchant even slept while working because no one approached him. The prices were really high, and the hero wanted to understand why everything was so expensive. Suddenly waking up, the man turned to the young man, asking if he would like to buy anything from the shop. Feeling awkward, Yanni replied that he was not going to buy because the items were too expensive. He sighed heavily, realizing that even here he remained a beggar, and decided to leave. Addressing the hero, Chu-Chi explained that she didn't need to buy anything at the moment. The primary goal is to improve the physical condition of the body so that abilities can manifest themselves even more strongly. Yanni thought about it. He realized that this made sense, as he would be able to use the enhancement and activation of his abilities. After some time, they found themselves near a place where they improved their abilities, and around them were strange eggs known as enhancement capsules. The capsule allowed one to enhance the power of talent, spiritual energy, as well as strength, speed, and reaction. Ma-san advised his brother to try the capsule himself, assuring him that he would like it. Suddenly, one of the capsules that he was supposed to enter to enhance his abilities opened next to him. Entering the capsule, the guy did not understand what to do next and just waited. Suddenly, the capsule began to close, which greatly frightened the main character. After the capsule was completely closed, he found himself in an unknown dark world. The system greeted the boy and announced that it was a system of rapid ability enhancement with constant energy, and each characteristic could be improved randomly by 10 or 15% per day, taking into account past achievements. Several abilities have also been suggested, including spiritual power related to the intensity of magic. The second ability allowed one to increase durability, enhancing strength and defense. It was also possible to improve reaction speed, which increased the ability to react and is associated with agility and durability. There is also an additional parameter, cell viability, which affected the speed of physical strength recovery and healing. While thinking about the upgrades, Yanni realized that they directly impacted his performance in the game and decided to choose one of the abilities based on his recent gameplay and fighting style. The first thing that came to his mind was to improve the double reinforcement with increased strength. But even if it increases power, it is also important to increase the ability to react to enemy attacks. Therefore, for the young man, reaction speed also played an important role and required improvement. He chose to improve reaction speed and immediately felt how the parameter improved. Looking at his hand, Yanni realized that he still had one day left, so everything should be okay. At that very moment, the deal was made and his abilities began to strengthen. After a few seconds, the capsule began to slowly open and thick smoke began to creep out of it. Feeling the changes in his body, the hero realized that he had experienced real excitement. Chu-Chi couldn't understand why the guy was there for so long, but he explained that it was the first time he had been in such a situation and he couldn't immediately determine which parameter he needed to improve. Looking around, the hero tried to figure out where Ma-san was. It turned out that he had gone to another street to get his prosthetics repaired, and Yanni wanted to know where they could wait for their friend. In fact, Ma-san asked them not to wait for him, as he would be able to join them tomorrow. Not knowing what to do next, Yanni still wanted to know where they were going. Luckily, Chu-Chi already knew what to do and said that they urgently needed to go book a room. Sometime later, events continued on the streets of a bustling metropolis. Walking through the dark streets, the young man was amazed by the sights he had never seen before. Chu-Chi wanted to ask Yanni if he had a room to stay overnight. In the afterlife, everyone could get one free room. Arriving at one of the motels, Yanni placed his hand on the reader. The information was read and the room occupancy was confirmed. Now Yanni would be able to rest in comfort, although the place was modest. Turning to the girl, the guy admitted that he was very grateful to her, and if it weren't for her, he would have gotten lost here. The girl replied that there was no need to thank her, as she lived nearby, and if he wanted to chat, he could always drop by at any time. Entering the room, Yanni looked around, and the place was indeed small, but suitable for resting his feet. Having settled down on the bed, the guy was happy to rest, as he was very tired after the last game. Taking a poker card out of his pocket, he thought about his grandfather and how he felt, and only when he collected all the cards, he would be able to leave this place. In the morning, the events continued, and the main character was still sleeping. It turned out that someone was watching him from the window of a high-rise building. It was a small drone filming it. Ma-san had such technology that he could easily find his allies using drones. Deciding to wake up his comrade, he knocked on his door, as it was already quite late for sleep. It was really unexpected for the hero that someone knocked on the door so sharply and woke him up. Yanni woke up. He was shocked to be woken up and asked to be given a few minutes to come to his senses. The guy decided to give him time to wake up and told Yanni to get ready while he went to get his sister to wake her up. The drone was still hovering in the air, filming everything that was happening nearby, including the embarrassed girl, who immediately guessed that this was Ma-san's prank and ordered him to quickly put the thing away. After some time, they began to move around the city, and it was clear that Ma-san had received a slap in the face for his pranks. Turning to his comrades, the guy decided to give them something useful. It is the team recognition bracelets, and when they put them on, the system will automatically assign them to one team, which will be very useful for games. It was a great gift because now they can play games together. Despite everything that was happening, they decided to keep moving and headed to the time bank to play another game. The next game was called Hide and Seek. The reward for winning was a 5 picks card, and the difficulty of this game was a little higher. Turning to his team, Yanni asked with a smile if they could handle this task. Without hesitation, the comrades replied that they were ready to accept the challenge and win. The game began, and the slot machine transported them to the space where the battle would begin. The events took place in an abandoned clinic that looked terrible. One of the game's participants introduced himself as a military man and explained that in order to win, they needed to unite and destroy the spirits in order to get out of here and gain time. It looks like he was trying to recruit them. The hero realized that they were stuck in this huge place. Anxious, Chu-Chi knew that they wouldn't be able to get out until they completed the game. The allies discussed their chances, noting who stood against them. In this game, the participants looked much more experienced, especially the military man who looked very dangerous and was gathering people into his team. This military man, known as the Flathead, was clearly an experienced player and had many types of combat equipment, and it looked like this was not his first time playing this game. Ma-san was not impressed by the appearance of this military man and turned his attention to another participant in the game. This was a man with excellent shock absorbers on his legs, which no doubt cost a lot. There was another strange guy standing nearby who seemed very happy to be participating in the game. This participant raised questions, as it seemed he would not be able to pass even the first test. Meanwhile, the game administrator reminded all players that the game would start soon. Suddenly, a strange child began to approach from afar. It turned out to be a doll, who announced that the game would last 60 minutes, and the condition for winning was to not be caught by the spirit during that time. In this case, a player's loss is considered to be when he falls into the hands of a spirit, after which he is eliminated from the game, and 100 seconds after the start of the game, the spirits begin to hunt, and first the spirit's assistants appear, and for killing each of them you can get rewards or hidden inventory. As soon as the doll disappeared, the doors began to open, signaling the start of the game. The soldier continued to tell everyone to follow him to find a suitable place for an ambush. People immediately left the room, realizing that the game was about to start and they needed to hide quickly. The hideout looked terrifying, frightening in its appearance and the presence of creatures that would hunt. The hero warned his team to be careful, as the spirits would soon begin hunting. Chu-Chi asked why they didn't follow the others, but Yanni explained that the game wasn't as simple as it seemed. In any case, if they pass the test, it will be wonderful. But if they come across spirits, it is better to stay away to avoid defeat. The rules of the game also stated that the spirit helpers would appear randomly, and their number was indefinite. The hero did not understand what it meant to fall into the clutches of a spirit, and he needed to figure it out. Suddenly, the guy heard strange sounds and thought that it was already spirits. However, around the corner there was only a military man who was slowly creeping up. The man thought that the people hiding here were spirits. The woman asked him to speak less and find the spirits faster. Looking at the main character, the soldier wished him luck and left with his team. This group of people walked around the city and scared other participants of the game, but they had to hide from the spirits. Masa noticed something interesting and called his team to take a look. Nearby, there were many drawings depicting different spirits. There were many creatures in the drawings, and the hero did not know if they would be able to cope with such creatures. The team decided to look at all the drawings to better understand their opponent. Instantly, there was a piercing cry, and the spirit announced that he had finally discovered the presence of people. The sound made Yanni realize that someone had been caught by the sinister creature, and he discerned its source in the hall before him. The creature persistently reported its discovery to the game participant. The man who was found did not understand why the spirit frightened him so much, because there was nothing unusual in its presence. In fact, the spirit was found, not he who found it, since the creature was already being hunted. The evil creature did not want to stop and feel fear. It sought to destroy all hunters for it. One of the allies had an ability called Ether Flame. This ability was striking in its power. It was comparable to the power of fire. The spirit was initially attacked with the flames of ether and was engulfed in bright purple flames. Then another member of the group intended to strike. Using her magical abilities, she turned to lightning to deal a powerful blow. After such an attack, the spirit experienced unbearable pain. Not only lightning, but also ether swirled around him. Then the ally decided to continue the attack, taking the spear in her hands. With the help of a sharp spear, she easily attacked the villain who threatened their lives. Watching the fight, Yanni realized that these people had powerful abilities, which impressed him. Masen was also intrigued by what was happening, and the noise of the fight reminded him of the cry of a dying pig. Suddenly the young man realized that the situation was far from simple, and ending the battle would not be easy. Meanwhile, one of the girls decided to take a selfie next to the defeated villain. No one could understand why the game was not over yet, and the girl assumed that the delay was due to the provider. Realizing that the situation was more complicated than it seemed, Yanni realized that this guy was not actually a spirit. He merely served the spirit that was helping him. At that very moment, the spirit's servant pulled out his enormous blade. The soldier quickly turned around to see what was happening behind him, and it seemed that the enemy had already been destroyed. However, the giant sword was aimed at one of the allies to attack. A moment later, the ally was attacked and could no longer continue the fight, as she was killed with one blow. The guy with supernatural powers immediately realized that this creature was still alive. Realizing that normal magical attacks would not help, the soldier began firing all his weapons. Multiple shots were fired at the spirit's servant to destroy it. The multiple shots created a loud explosion that obscured visibility, and it was unclear whether the attendant had died. Now the allies realized that this monster was just a small helper. However, because they did not know this, one of their allies was lost. By killing the spirit's servant, they obtained an artifact called the Eye of Displacement. The soldier considered this artifact to be very valuable, since it was obtained in exchange for life. Masen was pleased with this and remarked that it would be easier for them with these guys. Even the girl wanted to join them to be safe. At the same time, Yanni knew that they shouldn't relax until the real spirit showed up and they were set in motion by this artifact. The main character was very afraid that the real spirit was already here and ready to attack. Meanwhile, the creature with mechanical prostheses approached new victims. A strange smoke began to develop in the room, enveloping most of the space. The girl from the opposite team felt that they needed to leave as she had a bad feeling, but the military man laughed, not afraid of the spirit and ready for the fight. The soldier was experiencing true combat tension, saying with a smile that if one spirit appeared, then one person would die, and if two, then both would die. At the same moment, a mysterious portal began to appear nearby, which was located right behind the man. Instantly, another creature jumped out of the portal, looking very frightening. The vile monster was glad that he had finally found his victims and was ready to fight them. It was not without reason that the main character was worried, because now he saw that in front of him was a real spirit, much more powerful than his assistant. With a grin, the military man exclaimed that the spirit had indeed arrived on time. The man sincerely believed that he was the one who would end this game, so he tried to fire his rifle. But as soon as he pulled the trigger of the weapon, the mutant immediately stopped him and ordered him to retreat. This caused even more concern among the allies, as they saw that the soldier did not even have time to shoot at the monster. The terrible villain threw the man with all his might against the wall, depriving him of the opportunity to continue the fight. The force of the blow literally sent the soldier through the wall, and he was probably no longer able to continue playing. The spirit began to laugh, very happy that he had finally found people. Suddenly his gaze noticed someone else, and he instantly rushed towards another person present in the room. It was the same girl from the allied team who stood there, unable to move from shock. Her ally immediately began to shout that they shouldn't stand and look at the spirit, but rather they should quickly leave here. Trembling with pain, the girl screamed that as soon as she looked into the spirit's eyes, she immediately lost the ability to move. The terrible spirit screamed again that it had found people and must destroy them, after which it began to wave, preparing to attack. Fortunately, the ally managed to push the girl away so that she would not die from the spirit's first attack. At the same time, the hero shouted that they should not linger here and must run before the spirit noticed them. Watching all this, the guy also realized that only a reckless person would risk attacking head-on. The only way to win this battle is with the robot chicken that the guy has. It turned out that this chicken was able to sense dangerous spirits, and only with its help could they avoid them. The guy was genuinely happy to hear this, because if the chicken really had that much power, then they would definitely be able to win this game, and now they should concentrate on survival without wasting time and nerves on anything else. After a few seconds, the chicken suddenly began to cackle, warning of the presence of an evil spirit nearby. It was noticeable that the chicken started to get nervous, and the guy immediately realized that his robot chicken sensed something bad, realizing that they need to run or keep moving to avoid the spirit's attack. Meanwhile, in another room, events developed further. The main character's team ran to the shelter and began to think that, probably, the spirit went in the other direction. Ma-san watched the entire scene unfold. He realized that some of the crowd had been in the spotlight for a long time, but they had been displaced during the attack. In any case, it was useful, as it allowed them to gain some information about the spirits. The hero began to assume that they now knew that in addition to the spirit, there were several more servants here, and if they saw them, then the spirit would notice and move. Feeling afraid, the girl assumed that if they did not participate in the battles, they would be credited with completing the game when the time ran out. It was right, they had to hide until the time ran out, and Yanni agreed, since these are the rules of the game, but he noticed one detail. That is, if they defeat one of the spirit's minions, they will be able to obtain an unusual inventory. Yanni immediately thought that if these items were the keys to defeating the spirit. Ma-san couldn't believe these words, thinking that his ally intended to fight the spirit's servant and then the spirit itself. There were strange noises nearby, and the guy immediately turned around to see what was going on. The girl, stunned, did not know what to do and almost screamed in fear. Fortunately, the protagonist calmed her down in time, realizing that this way they could be discovered. Looking around, Yanni guessed that something was approaching them. The noises came from one side and became louder with each passing second. Trying to hide, the main character wondered whether it was really a spirit or a servant of the spirit, who was already very close. Peeking around the corner, Yanni saw that the spirit was indeed approaching them. Every second, the mysterious creature came closer and closer and made very strange sounds. The monster wielded an unusual weapon, which he dragged along the floor, causing terrifying sounds to echo throughout the rooms. Looking at this creature, the main character immediately thought that it was a servant of the spirit, and his weapon was probably a scythe. At this point, the spirit is focused on other participants, and they have a chance to kill the spirit's minion to get unusual items from it. And if they run away from here, they may regret the missed opportunity. Looking at Ma-san, Chu-Chi exclaimed that they needed to do as Yanni said, because the other ally was a coward and only thought about escaping. In the guy's opinion, this is called combat tactics, but if Yanni thinks they need to kill the minion, then he shares his opinion. Now, they had to make a plan, and if they decided to fight, they had to deal with the spirit's assistant quickly, otherwise the spirit would move here. As it passed by, the creature noticed that there were several auras nearby, signaling that the enemy was very close. Because of this, the insidious creature began to attack, declaring that today people would die and their souls would be stolen after death. Suddenly, the main character shouted that it was necessary to attack now. Jumping out from around the corner, Ma-san began to attack, using his biomechanical arm to strike. The attack was carried out immediately and hit the target, according to a preconceived plan. Yanni then struck his blow, summoning his magical hand to deal a crushing blow and destroy the spirit's assistant. The blow was strong, but the assistant easily dodged it. Then the guy decided to use his hidden trick and took out some balls. Ma-san threw them at the monster to prevent it from summoning the spirit. The balls, having hit the monster, began to glow with a bright red light. At the same time, Chu-Chi began to summon a huge fireball to shoot at the mutant. To increase its effectiveness, a fire attack, called the explosive flameball volley, was used. The clever scoundrel managed to avoid this powerful blow, which should have literally destroyed him. This made the girl immediately feel anxious, as she knew that if she had been hit by this blow, her allies would have already finished off her assistant. Yanni continued to encourage his team, shouting that they still had a chance to win. Using his magical abilities, the young man wanted to attack the monster, who was not paying attention and turned his back. A powerful blow hit the spirit's assistant right in the head, causing him to scream in unbearable pain and be defeated. The team couldn't believe their eyes as they destroyed one of the most powerful monsters in the area. It turned out that such a powerful attack did not damage the monster, and he could fight again, as he remained unharmed. The main character and the villain who stood in his way clashed in a duel, and now they began to fight not for life, but to the death. At the moment of impact, the monster screamed that the game was now over. Their attacks merged into one, It seemed like they had the same power and could fight on equal terms. But as soon as the attack was carried out, Yanni found himself in a completely different world, where cherry blossoms were blooming and a mysterious samurai stood behind him. After that very attack, his hand began to change its appearance, and the magical abilities disappeared. Thus, he could no longer use his magic as it had completely dissipated. Looking at his hand, Yanni immediately realized that he had lost this game. The samurai suddenly spoke up, apologizing for being there for too long. To return to his world, he had to act, because they were already waiting for him. Bowing before the young man, the samurai apologized again, feeling guilty for putting Yanni's life at risk. Ma-san and Chu the Chi couldn't believe their eyes as they saw their ally being hit with a powerful blow that was simply impossible to survive. Fortunately, the wound was not fatal, and Yanni was in severe pain and screaming from it, but remained alive. The alarmed girl wanted to know what had happened to the hero, but he insisted that she leave immediately and forget about him. Ma-san took the initiative, ordering Chu-Chi should leave as quickly as possible and take care of Yanni. The monster continued to watch his opponents, trying to understand what had happened. The experienced guy decided to find out from his system the weak points of this monster in order to win. Thus, the combat assistant was activated, which was supposed to help in the battle. The launch was completed, the recognition function was activated, and the combat artificial intelligence was turned on. Ma-san attacked with determination, declaring that the scythe-wielding scythe would pay for his actions and attack on Yanni. The girl did everything possible to help the main character, starting to search for medicine in her backpack. Taking the magic bottle out of her backpack, she immediately opened it. She then convinced Yanni to drink the potion so that it would help restore his tissue and heal the wound. As she cried, the girl realized that she didn't want anyone else to disappear before her eyes, so she decided not to let that happen again. Recalling the past events, Chu-Chi told her boyfriend that he should take this healing potion in the next game, as she heard that it was very effective. But the guy didn't listen to her, thinking that the next game would be easy and the potion was too expensive to use now. Besides, he believed that he could protect her without the potion. After their conversation, the potion remained on the table and was not used in the next game. Fortunately, Chi realized that the potion needed to be used and decided to use it to help the protagonist survive. The blow was really powerful and it left Yanni shaking violently and unable to move. After drinking the potion, the wound on his shoulder instantly healed and the pain no longer bothered him. At this time, the battle continued, and Ma-san realized that his opponent was very strong and that he would have to use a special attack to win. The enemy claimed the opposite, shouting that Ma-san was already dead. Without stopping, the boy put all his efforts into winning this battle using the Iron Fist. However, his attack failed to reach its target as the opponent easily intercepted his blow. The enemy thought that this attack was too slow, and he easily prevented it. Taking the scythe in his hands, the enemy was about to finish the battle, preparing for a powerful blow. Suddenly, Ma-san realized that he could avoid this attack and removed his biomechanical prosthesis. At that moment, his system discovered the enemy's weak point. Realizing that this was his only chance, the boy attacked the villain with full determination. Having struck, he exclaimed that the battle was now over. Feeling helpless, the spirit's assistant shouted that he couldn't lose so easily. However, Ma-san defeated a strong opponent in a fair fight. After the victory, the boy felt the samurai behind him disappear. Now he was truly free. The hero was glad that he survived, realizing that he was just a little short of being sent to the real afterlife. Learn a lesson. Chu-Chi shouted at the boy to be more careful next time and not run ahead of everyone else. Feeling awkward, Yanni realized his guilt and apologized, promising to be more careful next time. After the monster died, it immediately dropped a reward, which Ma-san raised. They eagerly began to examine the recovered artifacts to determine their value. The artifact obtained turned out to be truly valuable, high-quality devil feathers. A strange smoke rose nearby, causing the allies to become wary and wonder about its origin. Sensing danger, the hero warned that it was a spirit and that it was approaching them. In response to this, the team began to run away to avoid encountering the real spirit. The protagonist immediately ordered his team to move in a different direction to hide from the spirit. They quickly opened the door to another room and went inside to hide. Each of the team members breathed a sigh of relief, happy that they had finally managed to escape from danger. Turning to his ally, Yanni expressed interest in the artifact he had picked up after the battle with the spirit's assistant. Smiling with satisfaction, the guy thoughtfully examined the artifact, preparing to tell about it. It turned out that these were two feathers, one the feather of truth, the other the feather of lies, and by setting fire to the feather of truth, one can find out the location of the spirit and its minions for a short time. And if you set fire to the feather of lies, it will create an illusion to mislead your enemies. These artifacts possessed impressive power, and the feather of truth was the best means of gaining information about enemies. Masan handed the pen to Chu-Chi, was able to set it on fire and find out where the spirit was. When the feather burned, magical energy began to emerge from its ashes. Immediately after the feather disappeared, a hologram appeared showing a map with the location of all the rooms where the spirits and their minions could be located. There were different markers on the map, and the yellow ones meant minions, the red ones meant spirits, and the green ones meant regular players. With the help of this artifact, they could cover the entire area around, remember its type, the location of stairs and corridors. Realizing the need, Masan turned on the artificial intelligence to scan the hologram and remember the entire area. Thanks to artificial intelligence, Masan easily scanned the entire map and remembered it. The protagonist watched what was happening and realized that Masan's abilities were truly impressive, and so far he was far superior to him. Events unfolded on another section of the map, where the participants were worried about being discovered by the spirit. It turned out that it was the guys with the chicken, and they were worried about running into the spirit's helpers. As they passed the elevator, they saw it going up, which could mean that enemies were approaching. The worried boys exchanged glances. One of them assumed that they were enemies, but the guy with the robot chicken quickly realized that this was not the case. He realized this because his robot companion did not give any signal that would indicate the presence of evil spirits, and most likely it was just other players. Suddenly the door swung open and the chicken began to cluck loudly. When the elevator door opened, the participants found a strange pot inside, similar to the one used to pickle cabbage, and this led them to think that its appearance was not accidental. While the protagonist and his comrades watched the artifact's effect end, Masan successfully remembered all the details. Suddenly, Chu-Chi noticed something and asked the boys to pay attention to it. Another drawing was discovered on the wall, which was different from the previous ones present on the walls. Yanni and his friends saw the drawing. They did not understand its meaning, and the creatures depicted in it made them uneasy, since they had never seen anything like them before. At first glance, it seemed that the drawing depicted a spirit and his servants, but everything turned out to be much more complicated. The drawing depicted not only the spirit, but also a girl fighting with him. Also depicted were servants, seemingly fighting among themselves. At that very second, the girl heard something and asked her friends to turn around so that they could see the same thing. Looking up at the roof, Chu-Chi noticed that there were many lanterns installed on it, but their presence remained unclear. In the immediate vicinity stood statues whose heads had been partially destroyed, probably during some ritual. Masan took out one of the lanterns and discovered that they emitted a very unpleasant smell. Concerned, the boy immediately asked his friend not to touch the lantern for his own safety. As he continued to study the drawing, the hero began to understand that these lanterns were probably made from the skin of former participants in the game. Holding the lantern in his hands, Masan felt sick at the thought that it was made of such material. The wall also indicated that demons were being summoned here to kill players. After being killed, their souls were trapped in lantern vessels, creating endless energy to feed the spirits. The words filled Masan with awkwardness, especially considering that he had already held one of these lanterns in his hands. All these inscriptions indicate that this place is a room for summoning an evil spirit. Suddenly, someone screamed nearby, warning of the approaching monster. Feeling uneasy, Yanni instantly realized that someone was approaching them, and they needed to be careful. It turned out that these were other participants in the game who also experienced fear of the creature they encountered on their way. Each of them understood that they managed to escape at the last moment, otherwise they would already be dead. Suddenly, the guy with the chicken used his magical powers, summoning a fire of friendly magnetic bullets. He intentionally fired these bullets at his comrade, with whom he had previously escaped from the monster. Having fallen to the ground, the guy could not understand what was happening because his ally had just attacked him. The cunning boy only gloated, claiming that in this game, survival is the most important thing, and everyone should think only about themselves. At this time, the main character's team was approaching the scene and saw a guy with a chicken. Having spied them, the cunning villain decided to repeat his trick. He fell to the ground and started screaming, pretending that he was in a lot of pain. Feigning alarm, he warned that the monster was close and would soon reach them. Trembling with fear, the boy begged his allies to protect him. The main character also noticed something unusual approaching and warned everyone to be vigilant. Indeed, the container that had previously been in the elevator was approaching them. This object surprised Masan, who could not understand how the large pickle jar could move on its own. As it approached the people, the jug began to open, and they realized that there was something inside. Using his magical abilities, Yanni urged his comrades to prepare for battle and resist. In fact, 2 rabbits crawled out of the jug and wished the participants good luck in the game. The guy, looking at these rabbits, immediately realized that they could not be servants since they looked very weak. The funny rabbit started jumping out of the jug onto the floor and continued moving further. They behaved clumsily, as they could not jump properly, and one of them even fell on the other. The spectacle was truly charming, and Chu-Chi was surprised that they found such cute creatures. The frightened guy continued to shout that these were monsters and that something had to be done. And this is indeed the case, as the seemingly harmless rabbits began to take out their daggers, preparing for battle. The miniature rabbits persistently attacked with incredible speed, approaching the protagonist's team. Yanni realized that they seemed very weak and could hardly put up a worthy fight. The guy simply couldn't believe that such weak opponents dared to attack him. Another rabbit even attacked Ma-san, despite being much weaker than the guy. So without thinking, the young man dealt a strong blow to the impudent rabbit right in the face. Despite their cute appearance, they had to be destroyed because they could harm humans. That's why Yanni used his strongest attack, which destroyed one of the opponents at once. After the rabbits were defeated, their bodies burst into flames of bright red and blue colors. Ma-san guessed that these rabbits had a reason to attack, because even when they were defeated, they would recover as if they had not received any damage. Indeed, there was no trace left of the strong blows, and the rabbits seemed completely unharmed. Behind them, the guy continued to sit on the floor and scream that they were doomed to die. Once again, the rabbits began to attack, running faster, like real fighters who wanted to win. Although they were weak, they had magical recovery abilities and did not take serious damage from attacks. However, these ghosts were extremely vulnerable and could be easily dodged and attacked. The small creatures, armed with small weapons, concentrated their attacks on the main character's team, tirelessly continuing the battle. One of the rabbits managed to reach Ma-san and attack him, but he easily defended himself using his biomechanical arm, as half of his body was made of steel. Such a weapon was powerless against the guy, since the steel turned out to be stronger than the small dagger. The young man easily parried the attack on his head, throwing the small opponent a considerable distance away. Suddenly, Chu-Chi noticed something unusual and realized that this attack was special. At first, the guy did not notice that he was wounded, assuming that the girl was simply appreciating his attack. In reality, the situation was much worse, as the ghost attack had left him wounded. Looking at his hand, Ma-san couldn't understand how this happened because he had repelled the rabbit's attack, but he still felt that his strength was fading. It turned out that the fugitive knew that these servants were different from the others. The cunning villain revealed that these rabbits cannot fight directly, but gradually exhaust players by sucking out their life energy. Due to their weak appearance, his robot assistant couldn't even recognize them, but the guy almost died because he underestimated these little creatures. Alarmed, Yanni ordered his team to flee immediately. With a sinister grin, the villain declared that he would later find a way to fight them. While he activated his magical artifact, creating a barrier, and ordered not to let anyone in so that they could not escape. The villain wanted the other players to detain the minions, so he didn't let them leave. After this, the guy immediately ran, not intending to help others, but only trying to survive himself. Starting to cry, Chu-Chi realized that it would be difficult for them to get out of this situation, and it was unclear how they could fight against such opponents. Meanwhile, the rabbits continued to attack, heading towards the players to deal more blows. None of the allies knew what to do, because they were locked in a magical cage. Two rabbits decided to attack the girl, considering her a weak link and probably unable to repel their attack. The determined guy decided to come to the aid of his ally, knocking her to the ground to prevent the attack and ensure her survival in a difficult situation. After a series of attacks on Ma-san, his system instantly detected the life force leaking out of his body at a rapid pace. Looking into the eyes of her savior, the girl could not understand why this fate had befallen her again. During this time, the ghost continued to attack, approaching the players. It was becoming increasingly difficult to attack the hero, so he forcefully pushed the attacker away to prevent the attack. After being hit several more times, the boy suffered severe mana depletion, which gradually led to his death. Chu-Chi tried her best to wake up her savior, screaming for him to wake up and stop the leaking of life force. The battle continued, and now the next target was Yanni, who was attacked by two ghosts at once. The hero was so exhausted that he could no longer resist and began to think that if this continued, it would not only be Ma-san who would suffer. And their entire team and the guy, it seemed incredible that they could die from these two kids. Suddenly it dawned on the protagonist, and he understood the secret of these ghosts. The essence was in a pot that sucked out the mana of allies after ghost attacks. Worried, the boy shouted that they had been tricked and that the real body was that pot. Thus, he realized that they had only one chance to win. As he rapidly approached the pot, Yanni wanted to do everything he could to save his ally and break it. During this time, the ghost continued to attack and defend the vessel that was absorbing life energy. Suddenly, the girl decided to sacrifice herself, not wanting her brother Yanni to get hurt, seeing him in danger. With all my might, Chu-Chi hugged the rabbit and cried in pain, screaming for them to ignore her and destroy the vessel. She truly believed that the hero could save them by destroying the vessel that was gradually killing them. Filled with rage at the wounding of his allies, the hero continued to move forward with all his might. After a few moments, he approached the pot, which contained the life energy of all those who had suffered from the rabbits. While trying to hit the pot, the hero thought that he had made 2 new friends and was ready to sacrifice himself, but not ready to betray others. Using his strongest blow, Yanni shattered the pot into tiny pieces. Soon the life energy began to return to its owners. The girl, continuing to cry, closed her eyes and thought about death. But luckily it was all over and the hero came up to calm her down, because he had just broken a pot. The little ghosts turned into ordinary dolls. Masen woke up and thought he had died again, but it turned out he had been resurrected. He looked at his comrades and thought that they were all in the afterlife and had also died. In fact, this was not the case, and the danger was resolved. The spirit's servant was destroyed. With tears in his eyes, the young man realized that his life force had returned to him. He shouted that he was glad to be alive. Chu-Chi asked her savior if he had received the artifact after killing the spirit's assistant. While examining the fragments of the pot, the young man noticed that the artifact was indeed lying on the floor. It turned out to be a flame of displacement, but the artifact looked like an ordinary lighter. Masen suddenly noticed something terrible and warned Yanni to be careful. It turned out that there was a real spirit behind them, who sensed people nearby. The creature sought to kill all participants in order to end the game. The worried hero asked his comrade to come up with a plan to escape from the monster. Ma-san, trying to escape, thought about possible actions and techniques to effectively escape. Enraged, the creature continued to attack, its blows capable of destroying walls. A clever guy came up with the idea of using the illusion of the Pen of Lies. As soon as the feather was used, the participants of the game disappeared from the monster's sight. While the monster was distracted, they had the opportunity to escape and avoid the battle. After some time, the team continued running, surprised that they did not meet other players. Suddenly, someone shouted that all the other participants had died. It was a mysterious girl running with the team who claimed to have seen several players' skulls cracked. Not understanding, Masen decided to find out who this mysterious girl was and why she was with them. It turned out that she was also a player and entered the game with them. This was strange for the team, as they thought the girl was already in the game. But this turned out not to be the case, and she followed them and helped when they rescued other participants. These words greatly confused Ma-san, and he couldn't believe that the girl was so well versed in battles. Listening to the girl's story, Yanni did not believe her and accused her of deception. Lifting her up with his magical hand, he pressed her against the wall and demanded an explanation about the fate of the other players. Ma-san did not agree with such violence and asked Yanni to stop. The cunning guy realized that this woman was not a player and remembered the image of a woman on the wall presented among the spirits. Immediately, and Chu-Chi realized that this girl was connected with the summoning of spirits. The girl's gaze suddenly changed, and she asked the baby not to insult her. Her face turned terrible, and she declared that everyone had died an easy death. The hero jumped back in fear, seeing the true nature of the mysterious woman. Hiding her face, the stranger noticed that they were indeed quite the jokers. Then she returned to her normal appearance and apologized for her rudeness, explaining that she really liked the protagonist team. Hearing this, Masen no longer believed her and shouted that he would not fall for her tricks a second time. Trying to attack, the guy rushed forward, but suddenly the mysterious girl appeared right behind him. This greatly confused the guy, and he realized that his opponent had the ability to teleport. The woman not only teleported, but also used magical abilities on Ma-san. With her breath in his ear, Ma-san was stunned and blushed and could no longer continue to fight. Chu-Chi suddenly shouted at Yanni to look the other way. The enemy could also change its appearance, and now there were 2 Chu in the team. Chi, and Yanni could not determine where the real one was. Understanding the complexity of the situation, the hero realized that this enemy is very cunning and just wants to play with them. The situation was complicated, and the 2 Chu-Chi and Ma-san lying on the floor, unable to fight. The spirit realized that he had fallen for the player's trick, and this made him even more angry. He started shouting that all the people here must die. Suddenly, he heard people screaming in terror and realized that this was his chance to take revenge for the previous deceived battle. The spirit's assistant said that she had a lot of fun playing with such a strong team. Yanni heard a strange sound, as if someone was approaching. It turned out that this was exactly the case, and the wall behind him was broken through with one powerful blow. The spirit was furious and wanted only death for the people who had deceived him. Chu-Chi couldn't move from the spot because of the monster's gaze and couldn't start running away. the monster swung his huge hand to strike the poor girl. Luckily, the main character remembered that he had an artifact that he had recently acquired. After opening the lighter, Yanni planned to use it to move everyone in that room to the safest place. Immediately after using the lighter, all comrades instantly moved to another part of the location. Turning around in all directions, the girl could not believe that they were now safe and that nothing threatened them. Looking at the lighter, Yanni realized that they had managed to escape solely thanks to this artifact. After looking around for a bit, the team realized that they were on the roof of the hospital and could no longer escape. In fact, it wasn't that difficult because they only had 10 minutes to survive before the game would be over. Suddenly, the roof nearby began to collapse, as if something was trying to crawl out of it. It was that same terrible spirit who realized that the participants were hiding on the roof and decided to catch up with them. The angry creature climbed onto the roof with incredible speed and screamed that it wanted to destroy all people. Looking at this monster, the main character understood that he was not tired and would pursue them all the time. Now the villain saw that Yanni and his team had no chance to escape and was about to attack them again. After thinking for a while, the young man realized that all they could do was fight and they had to do everything possible to survive. Suddenly, Yanni's hand began to change its appearance and a magical aura appeared around it. The terrifying monster leaped several tens of meters into the air to deliver a devastating attack on Chu-Chi. At the same time, the protagonist's hand continued to change, and he could now use stronger magic. Using his enhanced arm, he began to protect the girl so that the insidious monster could not attack her. The ally was amazed by this, realizing that Yanni had activated the second phase of his talent and had become much stronger. This was indeed the case because the hand was so powerful that it could repel the spirit's attack. Looking at this ability, the spirit could not believe his eyes, not understanding how this was possible. Chu-Chi also decided to continue the offensive, rapidly approaching her enemy. Using the power of his biomechanical arm, the brave guy hit the impudent demon with maximum force, who almost killed their ally. Without wasting any time, the cunning girl used her magical abilities, releasing fireballs. After enough fireballs had been accumulated, she decided to strike directly at the villain to finish him off. The terrible spirit clearly did not expect such a development of events and simply watched as he was attacked. After all the fireballs reached their target, a huge explosion occurred that was supposed to destroy it. Now the main character exclaimed that they would show what his new team was capable of. After the explosion, the smoke from the fire began to gradually dissipate, and the spirit shouted that the humans were getting too carried away. Using his dark magic, the spirit teleported into the sky and began attacking from above, believing that these people were just his prey. With a deft movement, the protagonist dodged a strong attack and prepared for a counterattack. The giant monster's attempt was too slow and he missed. Looking at the monster, Yanni accidentally met his gaze and could no longer continue to fight, as he was bewitched. The spirit looked him straight in the eyes, believing that he was too arrogant and should now die. Worried, Ma-san decided to call upon an artificial intelligence to help him in this battle. Feeling a strong sense of anxiety, Yanni realized that he could not move because he had relaxed and made a mistake. Feeling the danger, the young man realized that he would be attacked, but he could do nothing about it. The ally hit him with all his might to prevent the main character from taking damage. Watching his opponent, the spirit declared that Ma-san would no longer help anyone. Their gazes met again, and it seemed as if the brave guy could no longer move. Sitting on the floor, Yanni feared for his comrade's life and thought that he might die now. The alarmed young woman realized that she had to pause her attack to calm herself before the next blow. Gaining speed, the spirit prepared to use its most powerful blow to end the life of one of the game's participants. But just as the blow was about to hit its target, Ma-san responded with a counterattack and easily broke the impudent creature's arm. The guy exclaimed that this monster had gotten himself into too big a deal and would now be punished. The allies were puzzled because they could not understand why the technique of controlling the enemy did not work. Even the monster himself could not understand how this happened, because his fighting style was impeccable. It turned out that with the help of artificial intelligence, Ma-san was able to change the monster's ugly appearance to a more attractive one, which protected him from the effects of magic. Experiencing severe pain, the impudent monster realized that his opponents were too daring, because they were just food for his stomach. At this time, Chu-Chi informed her allies that her abilities had been restored. Using his biomechanical arm, Ma-san began to float above the ground and decided to lift up his ally to strike from the air. This blow was much more effective and accurate, and hit the impudent creature straight in the head. The magic seal was used to deal a powerful fire attack to destroy the demon. The spirit had no choice but to watch, as the attack was stronger than his own abilities. After such an attack, only ashes should remain from the villain, because he could not resist such a powerful fiery force. Even the protagonist noted that the explosion was impressive, but thanks to his abilities, he was able to protect himself from the flames. Observing the actions of his allies, the hero realized that he could not stand aside and had to take part in the attack. The spirit could no longer bear such pain and screamed that he would take revenge on all people and tear them to pieces. Unable to stand this behavior from the monster, Yanni shouted that it was now his turn to deliver the finishing blow. The attack was successful, but the villain remained on his feet. With its last strength, the creature exclaimed that it was not going to give up and wanted to continue the fight. However, the battle came to an end, and Yanni only wished the monster a peaceful journey. Pointing his finger at Yanni, the monster said that he already recognized him and remembered his smell. As it evaporated, the creature continued to scream that it remembered someone who had the same abilities. Not understanding what was happening, Yanni tried to make sense of the spirit's words, but it was too late. After just a few seconds, the spirit completely disappeared, leaving only emptiness. At the place of his disappearance, a magic artifact appeared, which arose after the death of the demon. It turned out that the artifact was an inherited weapon, and it was called the Crescent. Immediately after receiving the artifact, Yanni found himself in an unknown place, where the Lord was already waiting for him. Watching all this, the young man could not understand what kind of dark creature was standing in front of him. It was beyond his understanding. The Lord was very pleased that Yanni had finally appeared before him. Listening to the unknown creature, Yanni was surprised that he was the object of his conversation. After a few seconds, the young man finally entered the game and realized what this strange vision was. At the same time, the game administrator announced that the game was over and an exit portal would soon open. The main character was glad that his team had done a great job and now they could return home. Suddenly, they heard someone else approaching them. It was that same scoundrel with the chicken who realized that the protagonist team was really powerful and decided to join them. Radiating rage, Ma-san slowly approached the villain and was happy to meet him. But before the guy could get there, the villain knelt down and apologized to the players, admitting his mistake and preparing for death. And he admitted that he was just a newbie and couldn't handle it himself. So he resorted to such tricks, but promised to change and asked to give him a chance. Watching him, the hero understood that this man was ready to do anything just to survive. Ma-san was about to attack the traitor who betrayed them at that very second. The clever Yanni decided to stop him, pointing out that their troubles were due to him, and yet they had no right to decide who should live and who should not, and so this time they decided to let him go. As the boy ran away, he laughed and shouted that Yanni's team was very easy to fool. His escape was short-lived, as someone with magical powers decided to stop him. It turned out that it was the same girl who had met Ma-san and the other team members earlier, and she declared that whoever did bad things would be punished. This greatly surprised the young man, because he knew that this girl was a servant of the spirit, but she announced that Yanni and the others had already passed the test and could leave, but she wanted to punish him. Feeling afraid, the boy shouted that the game was over and they should let him go. However, the spirit assistant was of a different mind and asked him to stay so that she would not be so lonely. Realizing that the girl wanted to help, the protagonist and his team began to leave. The friendly lady said goodbye to the players and decided to take on the villain. Sometime later, events continued in the city. Looking down at his clothes, the boy realized that his t-shirt was in disrepair. If this had happened, he could have been left without any clothes at all, since after each fight some part of his clothes suffered. A good-natured friend decided to share his clothes and temporarily gave them to Yanni. Since Ma-san knew that the prices of things in Huangquan were not particularly high, with a little time he could find some good things. Upon hearing this, the guy was amazed by this information, as he had no idea that such stores existed here. That's why they were planning to go shopping the next day to update their wardrobe. It was obvious that Ma-san was worried about something, and he really didn't want to go to the store the next day. Smiling at his friend, Yanni invited him to join them on a shopping spree. However, the guy decided to refuse, since he planned to skip the shopping this time. After a few minutes, they decided to see Chu off. She went home and said goodbye to her, as they intended to go for a walk the next day. A friend asked the main character if he wanted to take a rest too. He really did want to rest, but first he needed to eat well. Sometime later, they found themselves in a fast food restaurant where they were served a very tasty dish. The protagonist couldn't believe how delicious the food was here and ate it nonstop. Before eating, Ma-san decided to go to the toilet, and Yanni was surprised to learn that cyborgs also go to the toilet. Ma-san approached the toilet. He noticed a man walking nearby. As they passed by, they accidentally collided, and the man pushed Ma-san with his shoulder. Not paying attention to this, the stranger apologized and moved on. However, he then realized that he had collided with a cyborg who was walking past him. Because of this, the stranger began to shout at Ma-san, asking if his eyes were installed. Deciding not to stand aside, the protagonist decisively pushed the stranger away, asking why he was insulting his friend. The stranger, turning around, realized with surprise that this Iron Man also had friends. The rude remark made the protagonist even more furious, but Ma-san silently asked him to calm down. This behavior attracted the attention of those around him, who watched in surprise as the cyborg entered into conflict with a human. The faces of the onlookers showed bewilderment. Who could have thought that a car would protect its friend? The strange situation filled the guy with a feeling of awkwardness. To prevent further fighting, Ma-san pulled his friend aside, urging him not to fight with the one who had offended him. Yanni, looking at his friend, tried to understand what was going on and why they had avoided the conflict, because scoundrels always look for a reason to quarrel. Deeply concerned, the boy explained that the afterlife no longer had the same rules as the past life. In this world, the only thing that matters is talent, and technique and strength become secondary. To become a cyborg, one must give up one's talent, which is frowned upon here, as talent is considered a gift from God. One day, Ma-san suffered because of his talent and had to turn to technology to get his life back. He did not hide his true abilities. However, the boy was afraid that when Yanni found out the truth, he would treat him the same way as the others. Spewing anger and anxiety, Ma-san continued to claim that he did not want to be perceived as an outsider because Yanni and Chu-Chi is very important to him. At this moment, the main character began to have memories from his childhood. In the past, his classmates bullied him, calling him wild because he had no mother and his father was taken away by the police. This caused the boy much suffering, and he cried, claiming that he was not wild. Boys his age would tell him to get lost, refusing to play any games with him. Not wanting to listen to this, Yanni stopped his friend and asked him not to continue. Yanni put his hand on his heart and made a promise, and no matter what his abilities were, divine or mechanical, from that moment on, he and Ma-san were like his own brother. These words deeply touched Ma-san, and he couldn't believe that his friend was so kind to him. Tears streamed down his face as Ma-san thanked his friend for his kindness and promised that they would be friends forever. Coming closer, the hero asked his friend not to engage in self-abasement, because as one great man said, technology is the main engine of progress. Turning to his friend, the protagonist realized that together they could change this world with the help of his technology. Events continued to unfold in the store, and Chu-Chi didn't understand why Yanni was in the fitting room for so long. The girl was about to go inside to see him change his clothes. Eventually, Yanni showed up and apologized for the delay. Seeing him, Chu-Chi was amazed by his stylish appearance. His appearance was modern and versatile, which would help him perform better in games. The cyborg's best friend noticed that Yanni had changed as soon as he changed his clothes and finally enjoyed shopping. Happy for his friend, Ma-san suggested that they go out for a bite to eat together. There was a nice restaurant in their area, which they decided to go to. Soon, the restaurant began to experience events characterized by clumsy service. The main character was very surprised by this, as he did not expect to see waiters like Martins. Suddenly, a mysterious man appeared in front of the visitors, thanking them for visiting and introducing himself as the owner of the restaurant, named Jean. It turned out that this mysterious man was a celestial being and was able to provide them with food for as long as 50 years. The little sister decided to approach the man and asked him to serve a set meal for 3. The good-natured man was eager to provide comfort to his customers and invited them to take their seats as the food would be ready soon. A few minutes later, the first dish, monastery fried rice, was served on the table. The next dish was even more impressive in size and was called large assorted sinshan. The next culinary composition was the big samovar of the hell of eternal torment and was also striking in its size. After the first glance at this dish, the young man felt that his taste buds were simply stunned by such a rich and unique taste. He immediately expressed his gratitude to the restaurant owner for his culinary skills. Meanwhile, someone walked into a fast food restaurant wanting a snack and asked for a serving of any fried noodles. Turning around, the hero recognized a familiar voice. One of the participants of the previous competition, who took first place, came to the restaurant. The protagonist's comrades immediately recognized him and were glad to meet him because now they could talk. Suddenly Ma-san jumped up and exclaimed that it was the same guy with the doll from the previous competition that he won. The good-natured young man introduced himself as Zhu. Bei expressed his joy at meeting them. The team was also happy to see a man they had seen before but had not yet met. Zhu Bei remembered that in the previous competition, by distracting all his opponents, Yanni had helped him take first place. He immediately took something out of his pocket to thank for the help. From his pocket, he took out an unusual watch that fit in the palm of his hand. It was hard to see how they worked just by looking at them, but Yanni was delighted with the gift. The traveler said that he had accidentally earned them a long time ago, and that when the time came, they would learn how to use these watches. Yanni thanked Zhu Bei, promised to look after the watch. The guy also decided to treat everyone who had previously ordered. Zhu Bei, unfortunately, was busy with other matters, and he said goodbye to old acquaintances. The bird also managed to try the dish, and he and his owner had to leave the establishment. Suddenly, the boy heard laughter, and turning around, he noticed that his bird had become the object of laughter, and its face was covered with a drawing, making it look rather sloppy. Watching this cheerful company, Zhu Bei realized that it was precisely at such moments that people who could be called almost dead, could feel alive. As he left the restaurant, the guy felt a little sad, leaving such good-natured people. After the team had eaten their fill, they went into town and discussed when the next competition would start. It turned out that Ma Sen only participated in games when his pocket was empty. Hearing this statement, one of the girls suggested that her friend was too carefree. Looking at his watch, the hero realized that time was disappearing too quickly, and at first you spend on purchasing things and leveling up, and then you find out that there is very little time left, and therefore they need to participate in games. After examining his biomechanical prostheses, Ma San realized that they needed repairs to continue to work reliably. So the team decided to head to the time bank to collect their winning minutes and prepare for the next game. At this time, someone approached Yanni, asking if he had seen his brother lately. Hearing this voice, the young man could not believe that in front of him stood the same person with whom he had already met and talked. Xiaosha's voice, addressing the newcomer and expressing his joy at meeting him. The embarrassed guy continued to listen to him attentively, while the impudent fellow suggested that they find a secluded place for conversation. Unable to stand such behavior, someone decided to use force to avenge his actions. The blow was so powerful that Wang Xiaosha lost even the ability to speak. It turned out that the blow was delivered by Yanni, who wanted to make amends for the deception that happened when he was still a rookie. Looking at the offender, the hero wanted to know if he was ready to take back what was his. Despite everything, the scoundrel began to deny knowing the guy and did not admit that he knew the name Wang Xiaosha. The worried friend rushed to the main character, wanting to understand what was happening and find out the reason for the fight that had started. People immediately began to gather around to witness the fight on the street. Trying to find out if his local scammer had let him down, Yanni turned to the newcomer. In fact, the newcomer already knew that Fatso was a liar, and it was strange that anyone believed him at all. At that very second, the hero realized that he had wasted 5 whole days of his time. Meanwhile, Fatso turned into a giant catfish and tried to escape to avoid punishment. Those present could not understand why Yanni was behaving this way, because they did not know that he had been deceived earlier. With all determination, the young man pursued the swindler, trying to catch up with him and take revenge. Using his magical abilities, the protagonist decided to change his hand to strike. Suddenly, some impudent fellow dared to stop him in order to prevent the blow from being struck. The mysterious man exclaimed that there was no need for a fight here, continuing to hold Yanni. The stranger chuckled and remarked that he didn't want to fight in the street, and if Yanni was a smart guy, he'd better calm down and leave. Spying on the stranger, the hero shouted, insisting that he let him go, warning that it was not worth getting involved in this conflict. The stranger finally released the protagonist's hand, and Ma San ran up and tried to figure out the situation. Watching the boys, the stranger warned them against interfering in the affairs of the Huangquan coast. At the same time, the impudent fellow thanked Brother Zhu for his protection. The information about belonging to the Huangquan coast clan shocked Ma San. He immediately shared with his best friend his opinion that it was better to leave, since the situation could become dangerous, but the protagonist did not feel any fear of this clan. The ally realized that they had no chance, because the situation was extremely tense, and it was better not to get involved with this clan. So the comrade began to apologize for his friend, explaining that he had overdone it with alcohol, and they were leaving the place. The fat man watched them and warned them that in this world it was better to be wary of accidental conflicts. Immediately after this, he turned to his brother, asking what he was doing here. It turned out that Bei had gotten into trouble, and the teacher had sent him to sort it out. Walking through the streets, the protagonist sought to learn more about the guys from the Huangquan coast clan. It turned out that this was the oldest shop in the city. Their first leader was the famous En Wang, known for his power and influence. But since En Wang had already left Huanshuan, Yanni wanted to know who was in charge of the clan now. Unfortunately, his friend could not answer this question, but it was probably another influential person. Yanni thought about it. He couldn't understand why they weren't allowed to open their shop in the other world. After all, if someone could do this, then they could trade there too. Ma San also supported this idea, as he wanted to have his own shop to trade. Suddenly, the flying ship announced the arrival of the sandbox map, new level design with full immersion, high rewards and bonus cards in a new auto chess game. And this is a completely new kind of game that you can love in the first 3 minutes. On the same day, events took place in the GT Technology office, which served as headquarters for the auto chess tournament. At the entrance, people had to stand in line for trial passes. This caused a lot of inconvenience to the main character since he did not understand why these passes were needed for the game. The queue was huge. Everyone wanted to try their hand at the new game. In the guy's opinion, it could take several years to move up in this queue, which seemed absurd to him. A friend offered to replace him in line to speed up the process. Even their girlfriends wanted to help by bringing the boys lunch so they could continue waiting together. They had been standing in line all day, starting in the morning, and most likely they would have to have dinner here. The long queue was not surprising, considering that the game was brand new, at a decent price, and people were willing to spend a lot of time to try it out. The young man realized that this queue was no different from the real world. Suddenly, someone from behind turned to the group and offered them something. The mysterious stranger showed the tickets he had and offered to sell them, claiming that they would find what they needed. Chuchi immediately realized that he was speculating on tickets, selling them for more than they were actually worth. Masen turned out to be a fan of many artists and was surprised that the stranger had tickets to a concert of popular performers. The hero wondered how much time they would have to spend here to win this mysterious prize. Suddenly, a strange robot appeared and said that they had a problem. These were robot police officers who demanded to get ready, as illegal sale of passes had been discovered and they were going to arrest the violators. The ticket seller was shocked by this development, realizing that he was out of luck today as he was being pursued by robocops. A multitude of robots ran after him to arrest the offender, and he begged them to let him go, explaining that he was just trying to make some money. In an attempt to escape, the merchant forgot the tickets, and they ended up in the hands of the protagonist, although he did not even buy them. At this time, the staff began to announce that pass holders could come to the entrance to use the machine to enter the game. The happy guy immediately approached the device, feeling that they were lucky today. The reward in the new game was tempting, and the card of 1 diamond, 3 of clubs, as well as 10 days of bonus. These 10 days were just an initial bonus, and they could increase as you reach certain levels. Without thinking, the guy pressed the button, wanting to start the game as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the bandits were discussing what Zubei turned out to be a real scoundrel whom they underestimated. The fat man explained that this was just his subordinate who deserved punishment. But the woman asked the fat man not to worry, admitting Zhu's guilt, but fearing that he would be difficult to catch. In fact, the thing this guy stole was very important. Without it, they were in serious trouble. So the determined woman said they should deal with Zhu, and return the item as soon as possible. Gladly accepting this turn of events, Fatso agreed, as he was very eager to fight. Wang Xiaoxia convinced the woman that he would easily catch this guy and return the stolen item. At the time when the events of the new game took place, Yanni and Chu were lying on the grass chi. When he woke up, the guy didn't understand why they were there, and even together. Looking at his hand, he was surprised that they were holding hands. Trying to come to his senses, Yanni began to examine the area and realized that he first needed to figure out the goals that needed to be achieved in order to complete the game. Looking around, the hero still did not understand where Ma-san was because they had all been together before. Suddenly, he finally remembered what had happened during the move. When they entered the game, it seemed to him that some force was trying to separate them. They immediately began to move away from each other, as if they were moving in flight. The restless girl also felt confused about what was happening and was afraid of losing her team. At that moment, they decided to hold hands so as not to lose each other. During the move, such actions were extremely dangerous, and it was unclear whether they would be able to survive afterward. Unfortunately, the comrade did not manage to grab the main character in time, so they ended up in completely different places. It was then that Ma-san became lost from them, as they were unable to move at the same time while holding each other's hands. After some time, the girl came to her senses, and the guy was relieved that she finally woke up. Without understanding anything, Chu-Chi was still glad that they were still alive. Yanni tried to cheer her up and said that everything would be fine, but it was unclear where Ma-san was. At this point, they decided that they first needed to find their comrade and then continue playing the game. Meanwhile, the game administrator decided to make an announcement to the respected players and welcome them to the game Auto Chess. Now each of the players is a pawn and has freedom to move in any direction, and they have 3 days to get to the volcano, but they must not forget about the bracelets on their hands. The number on the bracelet shows the number of steps available, and the lower it is, the closer they are to death. The protagonist immediately looked at his watch to see how many steps he had left. The watch showed that there were only 50 steps left. To get more steps, they had to find all the monsters and destroy them. Once all participants were aware of the rules, the game began. Ma-san also woke up, but found himself in the desert and did not see his comrades. Everyone understood that they needed to move in the direction of the volcano, avoiding problems. Yanni realized that the number of steps was decreasing with each passing second, and the girl was worried, realizing that they might not have enough steps. Suddenly, a rabbit ran nearby, making strange sounds. Panicked, Chu-Chi was shocked and thought that there was a monster nearby, so she pressed herself against Yanni, seeking protection. However, when she realized that the monster was gone, she felt very awkward, realizing that she was very close to the boy. After realizing her behavior, the girl walked away and began to apologize. While moving through the desert, Ma-san began to overheat, and the AI system notified him of this. Continuing to move towards the volcano, the guy thought only about the fact that he needed to find his comrades, otherwise he would die in this game. Looking ahead, he noticed an oasis and thought it might be an illusion. However, he believed that this was a real oasis and began to run towards it. The guy was sure he was lucky, but he met another player who also discovered an oasis. It turned out that it was the same scoundrel from the restaurant, and he saw that Cyborg Scum was standing in front of him. The man shouted for the scum to leave as quickly as possible, because he did not want to see a cyborg near him. The villain continued to threaten, saying that if Ma-san did not leave here, he would finish him off. The guy was not going to tolerate this and decided to use his weapon to punish the impudent guy, ordering him to leave. The frightened man was amazed that the cyborg was resisting and would begin to attack him. Soon there was a loud explosion, and the impudent guy probably deeply regretted his actions against the good-natured cyborg. Meanwhile, Chu-Chi discovered a dead player and thought he was killed by other participants. Looking at the body, Yanni immediately realized that this man was not killed by other players. His head was damaged and his gear was intact, indicating that he had not interacted with any other players and that his killer was definitely not a player. Thus, the hero realized that the killer had great strength and did not need a weapon. This killer can only be a non-human creature that does not look like an ordinary person at all. Feeling afraid, the young man could not understand what kind of creature was trying to attack them. The villain really looked disgusting. He looked like a fish and screamed that he wanted to eat. The inhuman creature wielded a rifle and attempted to kill all players who approached it. Without hesitation, the girl used her magical powers and said that they would have fried fish for dinner. It turned out that the creature possessed not only weapons, but also magical abilities that allowed it to repel the fire attack. Making terrible sounds, the villain began to change his appearance, and huge sharp teeth grew out of his mouth. The sounds were so loud that they began to deafen the girl, and she covered her ears with her hands. Suddenly, someone from afar shot at the villain who was about to attack the main character. Seeing this, the guy realized that it was another player. Realizing what was happening, the stranger shouted at the players to run away as quickly as possible, as this creature was just a scout. The happy guy thanked him for his help and wanted to know if there was anyone else nearby, but Chu-Chi was against him communicating with other players. Smiling, the heroes suggested going together, since they still needed to reach the same mountain, and it would be easier together. After hearing the proposal, the girl refused, as she was not interested in it at all. The next moment, she started aiming straight at Yanni, preparing to attack him. However, it turned out that the enemy was behind the guy, and the girl was aiming to finish off the villain. The embittered creature got what it deserved because it was going to attack people, but the shot hit it right in the head. Looking at this freak, Yanni tried to understand where it came from and what kind of creature it was. Suddenly, the girl exclaimed that they should pay attention to the side, as there were more enemies there. This turned out to be true, as a number of scoundrels began to emerge from the water, revealing themselves to be their neighbors. Meanwhile, Ma-san continued to move forward and did not understand where the other players were. It was at this moment that he felt a strong desire to eat. After all, if he doesn't eat now, he might die and won't be able to get to his comrades. Looking around, the guy noticed that there were several ducks not far from him. This was his only chance to have a snack, since there was absolutely no food nearby except these ducks. Starting to run as fast as he could, the young man tried to catch as many ducks as possible in order to roast them and eat them. This behavior greatly irritated the ducks, and they decided to take action. In fact, they were not ordinary ducks, and they suddenly began to change their appearance. 3 little ducks turned into giant birds with incredible muscles. These ducks seemed like real bodybuilders, and now they were going to take revenge on Ma-san for hunting them. Meanwhile, the main character, together with Chu the Chi, continued to fight, not realizing how many more mutants they had to kill. There was an incredible number of villains living in the swamp, and their number was growing with each passing second. Turning to the stranger, the young man exclaimed that the longer they stayed here, the less chance they had of leaving. Suddenly, a nearby mutant began to attack the traveler from behind and wanted to deal her a treacherous blow. Using his magical abilities, the protagonist saved the stranger so that they could leave together. But first they needed to get rid of the mutants that were behind them, so they decided to finish them off. The hero in this situation was going to become bait so that the archer could kill the villains who were approaching. Meanwhile, Chu-Chi was hiding because her ally ordered her to stay back and not fight. Sighing heavily, the girl thought that Yanni had probably deliberately arranged a conversation with the stranger. Events continued to unfold in the desert, and Ma-san realized that he himself had now become prey. Suddenly, the boy decided to stand up for himself and exclaimed that he could still fight. The angry duck looked at the young man because she wanted to understand whether the cyborg man could really continue to resist her. The clever young man stood up and shouted that he was still capable of fighting and that this chance could not be missed. The battle continued, and Cyborg found himself in mortal combat with the duck. Their forces were equal, and both had difficulty in the fight, trying to gain the upper hand. A lone brave man named Ma-san was able to defeat the duck despite their superior numbers. Apologizing to the duck, the young man said that he would have to disgrace her in front of her fellows. He used a painful hold to show who was stronger and took the duck into a chokehold. The duck could not withstand the onslaught and began to give in, trying to escape from the grip. Thus, Ma-san won this fight and easily defeated the muscular duck. Her comrades did not like this and approached, preparing to fight together. The worried young man did not understand what they were going to do with him, as the creatures began to behave extremely strangely. The ducks, in a sign of victory, began to throw Ma-san into the air, congratulating him on his victory in a fair fight. While the fight continued, the protagonist tried to buy time for the archer to kill all the monsters. The stranger did indeed display impressive fighting skills, easily killing the approaching monsters. The hero admired the way the archer fought, and he decided to find out her name. Smiling, the girl asked him not to get distracted and to continue the fight. A more dangerous monster appeared nearby, who announced that the travelers were in a forbidden place and would be punished. Realizing that it was their boss, the guy immediately realized that their main enemy was standing in front of him. The vile creatures began to gather, preparing to attack simultaneously, obeying their leader. The embittered monster ordered his brothers to punish the criminals. The worried girl pushed the guy and ordered him to hide. After pushing him away to avoid a fatal blow from the monster boss, she came to her senses, trying to understand what happened. Yanni hurried to check on Her Majesty, Chu the Chi that had just saved him from death. However, where she had just stood, there was no trace left. The boy hesitated, thinking that she had died under the powerful blow. Suddenly, a monster appeared behind him, ready to strike with his trident. Chu Chi screamed at the top of her lungs, warning her ally of the approaching danger. Armed with his new weapon, the guy easily dealt with the enemy, defending himself with a shield. Thus, the weapon called the Month of Life was successfully used. Filled with rage, Yanni screamed in frustration, realizing that he was guilty of the stranger's death in this fight. Watching his ally, Chu Chi was confused, but she was worried after seeing Yanni almost die. The leader of the monsters reiterated that he was going to use lightning to free the man in question. Protecting himself with a magical shield, Yanni was furious as he saw the dangerous fish threatening him and his friends. Fending off the powerful blows, he did his best to move forward and defeat the head of the monsters. Yanni took to the air and prepared for his next strike, ready to introduce the brazen creature to the tip of his sword. The clever monster leader blocked the strongest attack with his staff. This was followed by a series of even more powerful attacks, but the boss easily repelled them. Realizing that this could not continue, the protagonist hit him hard with his magic fist. But this blow did not achieve the desired effect, and the main monster ordered to stop the fight. Using his magical weapon, he began to threaten the protagonist and ordered him to stop. Chu Chi immediately ran to the guy to help him, but he ordered her to stop. All this time, the boss was looking at the main character's sword, wondering where he got it from. With exhausted strength, the girl tried to save the young man, but he constantly stopped her, begging her to listen to him. But the girl was not going to stop and did everything possible to save her comrade. Turning around, Yanni noticed a monster approaching and about to attack. Sometime later, the events took place in the desert, where Masanu felt very embarrassed about his actions, not believing that he could make friends with the ducks. The mysterious creatures also gave him many different things that would help him in the future. One of the ducks also showed him the road he needed to take. Thus, the guy found true friends who helped him find the right path. Meanwhile, the monster was approaching Chu Chi, and she begged him to let Yanni go. The impudent monster had no intention of doing so and began to raise his sword to deal the final blow to the protagonist. Suddenly, someone attacked the villain from behind to stop him. The shots had a freezing effect, really distracting the boss. It turned out that the stranger had survived and decided to help the wanderers she met along the way. The villain could not believe it, seeing that his defeat was inevitable since he could no longer move. When boss's body was completely frozen, the girl walked up and hit him hard, shattering him like normal ice. Seeing this, the fish immediately began to hide in the swamp, afraid of the girl who was able to defeat such a strong opponent. The fight was really tough, and Yanni almost choked from the fight with the boss. Looking at her comrades, the girl warned that they needed to get out of here as soon as possible. Chu did not like this behavior, Chi, and she declared that this girl was a villain. According to the ally, the villain deliberately used them as bait to kill the boss. Coming closer, the main character began to calm her down, claiming that Chi doesn't need to worry so much. Turning around, the stranger noticed that it was useless to continue this conversation and began to walk away, wishing the travelers good luck. Meanwhile, Ma-san finally got out of the desert and was very happy about it. Looking around the area, he discovered that there was a volcano nearby and immediately thought of Yanni and Chu the Chi may be waiting for him there. Suddenly, someone on motorcycles started approaching at speed. The alarmed guy couldn't believe his eyes because he saw people. These people were clearly hostile and began to mock the cyborg, saying that he should take the charger with him. Looking at his opponents, the young man realized that they were just provocateurs trying to start a fight, and he asked them to attack him one by one because that was the only way he could defeat them. It turned out that on one of the motorcycles was the same scoundrel who had previously insulted the cyborg. Ma-san couldn't believe it. He thought that this scoundrel had been dead for a long time. Suddenly, a guy stopped nearby and decided to ask Ma-san if he really beat up his friend, and he warned that if they all attacked him together, Ma-san would definitely not be able to cope. The mysterious stranger declared that he was very fair, and so he offered Ma-san to retreat half a step, and in exchange they would let him go. Another of the villains believed that there was no point in wasting time on the cyborg. It was better to take it apart. Suddenly, someone nearby shouted, condemning the bikers for their impudence, and how they could beat up just one person. Looking around, the biker could not determine who was talking to him. The stranger shouted, advising all the bikers to leave here. Because the guy is his old friend, and if they show malice, Zubei will be very angry. The villains realized who stood before them, and this man was extremely dangerous. But the boss decided to continue arguing, saying that he didn't care about the cyborg, but anyone who interfered in the affairs of his clan would pay for it. Hearing this, Zubei decided to take action and jumped off the mountain. A smart guy appeared right behind the boss and reminded him that before saying such words, he should look at himself in the mirror. Meanwhile, events were unfolding in the game administrator's room, where one of the administrators was outraged that almost a whole day had passed, but there were still many living players, and if this continued, Mr. Baitong would lose his temper. The girl then turned to the robots that created the game and accused them of making it too easy. There were very smart robots in the Abnormal Games Research Center. They didn't even know that they still had a secret weapon. The administrator immediately ordered them to use this secret weapon to destroy as many players as possible. Approaching the control panel, the robot pressed the start button, activating the secret weapon. Somewhere in a dark corner of the game world, a very dangerous creature has appeared and begun its hunt for players. The mysterious creature was gigantic in size and posed a huge threat to ordinary players.